The story begins with the brave and valiant warrior defeats the king of the underworld in another world. The hero, who had protected the peace of the continent in recent years, was praised by all. He simply smiled, thinking that he would finally be able to return to his world. Suddenly, he was transported to another place, and an entity told him that he had made an excellent choice in deciding to save the world once again. At that moment, the young hero found himself in the palm of a colossal being, a creature with elven ears, pale skin, shining blue eyes, and long white hair. In front of such a presence, the hero seemed small. This was not their first meeting. He raised his head and noticed that every time he saw her, the conversation turned to choice. Because of the reset, he always started from scratch, so he wondered if there was any choice at all. In any case, he asked if she would send him back to his world now. The entity stared at him and replied briefly that yes, she would send him back. But then the protagonist asked if, after stealing his talent from another dimension and making him work for 20 years, she would not give him any compensation. The hero added without hesitation, for example, by allowing him to keep his memories or perhaps a little magic. Then the entity revealed that while he was here, time in his dimension had stood still. His time had been preserved, so he had lost nothing. At this explanation, the young man gritted his teeth in frustration. Finally, he sighed and gave up. He had no choice. He agreed, asking only to be sent back, and the entity spoke calmly again. The elf asked him not to worry, as compensation for the time and effort spent here would be provided. Of course, he would not remember this. And so she offered the hero a gift, a fragment of supreme power. The entity said it was giving him a particle of its power as a gift. Depending on his choice, the flow of the dimension would change, and the world would be shaped according to his will. The hero paused for a moment before asking if she could at least give him a hint. The answer was no. Outraged, he shouted, asking why everything always ended in nothing. He asked her to at least leave him with memories of the continent. The entity found the young man's despair amusing, but did not scold him. Then she raised her finger to the man and touched the hero, who was momentarily terrified. Finally, she said it was time to go. The young hero, still confused, protested. He asked her to wait a second, as he had not yet finished speaking. But it was too late. The hero's body was enveloped in a sphere of shining light from the divine touch. His return had begun. The giant creature looked at him, smiling, and proclaimed that he should return to where his journey began, to the world that would determine his fate, adding that it would continue to watch over his journey. The hero fell into the abyss until he completely lost consciousness. A moment later, he woke up, and immediately closed his eyes from the bright white light. No longer in armor, the once adult man was now a little boy. He lay in bed, awakened by the blinding light. The boy sat up awkwardly and yawned deeply, wondering what was going on. He felt strangely rested. Picking up his phone, he saw dozens of missed messages. It was his manager. The protagonist's shift started at 7 a.m. His manager had been desperately texting him since early morning, but the boy was fast asleep, and now it was already past 9. Like a marathon runner, the boy jumped out of bed and rushed to work as if his life depended on it. Upon arriving at the 24-hour store, he was severely reprimanded. They said that if Jo-young continued to be late like this, it would be difficult for them to continue working together. The protagonist bowed in apology. Deep down, he thought he just wanted to be poor for one day, and he asked himself why his life was always so complicated. Behind the counter, he could only sigh. With his rent overdue, even 2 part-time jobs weren't enough, and this job wouldn't last long either. A vague thought flashed through his mind. If only he could wake up. Suddenly, something frightened him, and he stared ahead. A notification appeared before his eyes. Exclusive skill activated. Skill master. X. He was in shock. But now a brief explanation about the awakened, those who came to be called users. 5 years had passed since augmented reality, as if taken from a fantasy novel, had taken over the world. Fields began to appear all over the earth, and the world began to revolve around the new resources extracted from them. Users gained the power to conquer and explore these fields, which were dominated by monsters. Even small tasks in these fields could bring in money. That's why everyone dreamed of becoming a user. Even if it meant stepping into a completely unknown world, the rewards were too sweet to ignore. Of course, not every user became rich. Some woke up with powerful, unique, high-level abilities from the very beginning. Others were not so lucky. At the top of them all was the world's #1 user. The first to reach level 70, his name was Muhammad Al, possessor of the unique SS-Rank ability, Dragon Speech. One day, Muhammad posted a video on his personal channel. Thousands of people clicked on it and watched it everywhere, and couldn't take their eyes off the screen for a second. The warrior stood in a fighting stance with his signature weapon, and bravely fought monstrous beasts. Suddenly, his sword began to transform and shine with a bright light. It was the magic of every magician's dream. It was a spell that every fantasy fan had always dreamed of creating. In the heat of battle, he delivered his final blow, a meteor shower that was about to completely destroy the monster French fries. The audience was in shock. Some students who watched the video discussed it excitedly, while others said it was amazing to see it with their own eyes, that it was crazy, asking if it was an A-rank field, and wondering how even at level 70 he could do it alone. Massive meteors destroyed everything in their path. Even monsters capable of destroying cities couldn't withstand the onslaught. By the end of the battle, only the warrior remained standing, surrounded by craters where the monsters had been reduced to ashes. Could a mere monster withstand the fury of nature? The end of the video was approaching, and so he said that the ability they had just seen was Meteor Shower, rank SS. Exactly 1 week after the release of this video, if anyone could show him a spell more magnificent and powerful than this one, he would give away this artifact, the Elemental Ring. The first and only SS rank artifact ever shown to the public, the dream accessory of any user with magical abilities. After the video ended, the woman threw the phone on the table in disappointment, calling him an idiot. The man next to her asked why. After all, just offering such a prize is grand. She replied that he was essentially saying he wouldn't give the prize to anyone. Then she shouted angrily, asking where in the world there was anything more powerful than an SS rank ability. She pointed out that he had even appointed himself as the judge of the spell. Judging is subjective. This guy has no intention of giving away the elemental ring. She became even more upset. She said that it was so unfair and that he was so annoying. Even though many people were annoyed by his arrogance, the video went viral. But for most people, it still seemed like a distant reality, a story from another world. While our protagonist, casually strolling through the field with monsters, did not stop and run away, but simply looked down at the creature, but did not turn on the camera. The wind blew gently. Several small round monsters began to scatter in panic as soon as they sensed his approach. Joan began to rotate his index finger in the air, tracing invisible circles. Suddenly, the sky burst open with a huge bright explosion, and fireballs began to fall. A meteorite. Everything around him was engulfed in flames. He stood motionless in the center, coordinating a massive attack. A beautiful demonstration of power. Flames, burning stones, complete destruction. The green field disappeared, turning to ash. Standing on the only floating rock, Zhuang looked at the camera and spoke excitedly. He told Mr. Muhammad Al that his skill was incredible, and that this was his meteor shower. The video turned the internet upside down. Everyone watched the demonstration with wide eyes and open mouths. The power displayed by this boy was enough to raise a city to the ground in seconds. The comments kept pouring in. Several stood out among them. They said that the effect was stunning, that the meteor shower looked like the first of its kind, and that although the battlefield looked like an F-rank zone, everything seemed more powerful than usual. Others noted that the ability looked identical to the one already known, but visually much more powerful. In the end, one truth was undeniable. Muhammad Al had lost. But the most striking comment of all was this one. Who was that young man in the video? Returning to the lore, upon awakening, users usually receive a unique trait. This trait enhances the effects of certain abilities and is often compared to classes in games. The most famous traits are Dragon Speech, Miracle, Regeneration, and Death Blow. A user with Dragon Speech becomes a mage more powerful than a dragon. A user with Miracle becomes a healer capable of reviving even the dead. A user with Regeneration becomes a tank that can regrow limbs and continue fighting. A user with a Death Blow becomes a warrior capable of defeating any enemy. But what about the Skill Master? After his video went viral, Yoo-Ju-yeon, the protagonist, searched for answers on his computer alone. When evaluating unique traits, he learned that the first thing to consider is the level. The higher the level, the better the effects, and the more additional abilities. He watched dozens of videos and read news articles and reports until he realized something important. Known levels range from F to SS. Eating instant noodles, he decided to test his abilities. His status window displayed intriguing information. Unique trait, unknown, level X. The registered name was Yoo Ju-yeon, current level 1. His unique trait, called Master of Skills X, stood out for its extraordinary potential. He couldn't help but say that it was definitely an insanely imbalanced trait. But upon closer inspection, his excitement faded. Yoo Ju-yeon's stats were all at the beginner level. He slumped at the table, discouraged and pensive. Even an average person would have more than that. Well, at least he had the Skill Master EX trait, which allowed the user to use any ability. In addition, there was a bonus effect called Passive Income, Level 1, which gave 10 SP every 24 hours, always at midnight. After reading all this, he didn't even understand what it meant. Only 2 sub-skills, and on top of that, any user could learn abilities from books. He didn't even know if this trait was good or bad. Then a new notification appeared. Training mission. Try to copy a skill. There was only one limitation. Copied abilities were deleted every day at midnight. The boy thought that a training mission upon awakening was something new for him, but soon he became discouraged again. To copy someone's skill, he had to go to the battlefield. With all his stats at 1, it would be suicide. Still, he decided to learn more about the abilities, until he stumbled upon a video of Muhammad Ali, a hero with the meteor shower ability. The system continued to display more and more information windows. One of them described a powerful skill, Meteor Shower S, capable of summoning 20 meteors. Immediately after that, another notification appeared. Training event activated. For now, skills can only be used in the event, and all characteristics are increased by 999. The system asked if the main character wanted to copy Meteor Shower. This caught Jo-young off guard. He realized he could copy it just by watching the video. Meanwhile, someone was watching a demo video of Zhuang taking a sip of a drink. It was none other than Muhammad Ali himself. Suddenly, a woman appeared with a remote control and turned off the TV. She caught the hero's attention and asked if it was really a good idea to give away the elemental ring just like that. Was it really wise? Muhammad stared at the glass. He asked what the chances were that it would fall into the wrong hands. The hero had learned this skill just a week ago. The woman replied that there were many similar skills, but he didn't believe her. He asked what if it was an SS-Rank skill with the exact same name. She objected that there was no confirmed information. It could have been staged. There were no traces of that field, at least not of SS-Rank. Muhammad firmly stated that it was at least a unique feature of SS. With his arms half-crossed, sitting on the sofa, Muhammad stared at the ring. He decided it was better not to get too close for now. He asked them to send a business card along with the ring and say that it was a gift for someone he would like to be friends with in the future. Meanwhile, Ju-young worked in the store, muttering and looking at his phone, saying that the views were just insane. They even made a video for him and sent it to him on a flash drive. Suddenly, a little girl approached him and asked if he sold Taekwon jelly. But Ju-young didn't notice and continued to laugh to himself, thinking that since his face couldn't be seen, he would be an idiot not to post it. The girl, still trying, attempted to climb onto the counter. Even so, he thought that if he ever made it big, there would be no trait more imba than this, until a deep voice interrupted him, saying that his daughter was asking if they had Taeokpang jelly. Startled, Ju-young replied, "Ah, that's what she meant, of course, they had it for sale." After making their purchase, the customers left, and he slumped behind the counter again, thinking there was no chance they would actually give away an SS-ranked item. But then he smiled, anticipating that some miracle might happen in his life. But if they did, he wanted to earn enough to live comfortably forever and become as strong as Muhammad Ali, whom the whole world admires. He smiled and said that until recently, it had been just a pipe dream. But now it seems that he really can do something. His phone vibrated, and a notification appeared. It was from Muhammad Ali. The message said that he would give the elemental ring away without any conditions. The internet exploded with comments as soon as the news spread. One said he would join the chat. Another asked if he was really going to give it away. Amid the commotion, some wondered if Muhammad had lost his mind. Ju-young's eyes widened at the next comment. Last time, he promised to give anything to anyone who brought him an S-rank staff. When someone did, he paid 200 billion in cash. Now in shock, not knowing how or why, Zhang suddenly found himself standing in front of a woman. She introduced herself. She said she was Lee Soo-young, Muhammad Ali's secretary. She was here with the Ring of the Elements. Shortly after, they got into the car, and Ju-young remained frozen, still not believing what was happening. She continued to talk to him. She said they were taking him home, and that the master would like to meet him at least once. Later, lying in bed, the boy stared at the ring in his hand, wondering if it was fake. He quickly opened the status window of his newly acquired item. It was an elemental ring, S, a rare accessory offering impressive bonuses. Ju-young was stunned. He thought these stats were absolutely insane. Jumping out of bed, he shouted that now was not the time to lie around. His magic had increased by 40 points, and he needed to go hunting right now. Then he realized, thinking to himself, that all his stats were at 1, which was too low. He needed armor, but that required money. Walking over to the computer, he thought that maybe the views of the video he posted would be enough, but he still wanted to avoid revealing his identity through channel verification. He sat down in front of the screen and began to coldly consider his next steps. Was there a good way forward? Suddenly, his eyes widened as he read something that caught his attention. 3 days ago, someone had posted on a free bulletin board, and everyone seemed to agree. Healers were annoying. Healing skills were pure gold. Just by providing emergency treatment before entering the field, one could earn hundreds of thousands of won. No one would go into a cave without a healer. They offered all kinds of services, C-rank treatments, including broken bones and F-rank or lower status ailments. The price for treatment could reach $1 million. Ju-yeon was excited at the thought of getting a mountain of money if even one person showed up a day. Without wasting any time, he headed to the D-rank swamp field in Seoul Grand Park. But when he arrived, he found the place completely deserted. Looking at the empty landscape, he could only think that all the good spots were already taken. So this was all that was left. Now he had to pass the time. With that, he took out his phone to entertain himself. Meanwhile, blood dripped onto the ground. Meanwhile, someone appeared in the distance, running desperately and carrying a seriously injured young woman. Our protagonist, unaware of what was happening, smiled, enjoying the music and thinking that if he didn't enter the field, there was no danger, right? He decided to think positively, because nothing could happen outside the field. But this thought was interrupted when the man carrying the young woman stopped right in front of him. The man's gaze was piercing and direct. The girl in his arms was completely unconscious. Ju-yeon froze, sweat dripping from him as he stared back at the armored man now towering over him. The man did not take his eyes off Ju-yeon, the wounded girl still in his arms. Jong stared back from the ground in complete silence until the warrior gave a direct order to prepare the skill. Zhuang's expression instantly hardened, surprised at how rude the approach was. He thought, what the hell? No matter how urgent it is, it's rude to show up like this. He angrily recalled a particular customer who condescendingly ordered him to give him red cigarettes. Thinking to himself, the protagonist grumbled, "Doesn't this guy think he's some kind of clerk in a store or something?" Even if it was a copied skill, it was still a C-rank healing with excellent effects. His face froze, full of dissatisfaction. Jung stood up and shouted impatiently, telling him to look here, and immediately the warrior in armor said he would pay 20 million up front. Immediately after that, he completely changed his tone, forcing a smile. He even bowed and invited the warriors to come in. The smell of blood filled the air, almost making Ju-yeon vomit. The man laid the girl on the ground. She had lost a limb in the battle. Kneeling down, the warrior held the girl's severed arm. The scene was brutal. It took courage to deal with it. With determination, the warrior moved the arm back into place and turned, shouting and ordering the healer to act quickly. Trembling, Ju-yeon looked at the unconscious girl on the ground, thinking that he had only seen such things in movies, and that this was the first time he had seen it in real life. His fingers trembled. He was terrified. Would the skill work at all? But then he gathered his courage, reached out his hand, and cast aside all hesitation. A powerful light burst from his hands as he declared that he had to make it work. The system responded, Restoration Light. Rank C, Ju-yeon applied his power to the girl's body while the warrior held her hand, trying to regrow it while the healing was in effect. Later, lying in bed, Jong let out a long sigh. Remembering that couple, a chill ran down his spine. That crazy guy asked for healing 3 times. If it weren't for the elemental ring, he would have been finished. A system notification popped up. Mana fully restored. Plus 20 when equipped with the ring. Ju-yeon stared at the ring with a serious expression. The girl's injuries. What the hell is going on inside this field? Soon he clenched his fist, determined. In any case, one thing was certain. Suddenly, thousands of banknotes began to fall from the sky. Zhuo's eyes widened. He was more excited than a child at an amusement park. That was when he made his decision. He could finally quit his part-time job at the store. Money was no longer a problem. But now a new question arose. Now that he had cash, what should he do? Opening a cup of yogurt, he wondered what it could be. Stocks, investments, or crypto? In the end, he decided that now was not the time. Then he did something unforgivable. He threw away the yogurt lid without licking it. Even with a pile of money, losing his manners was a disgrace to the traditions of his ancestors. Ju-yeon quickly came to a conclusion. He needed to earn SP to level up. Enjoying the yogurt, he tasted a luxury he had never known before. He started looking through his status window and stumbled upon a new mission, a training mission. Try to level up the passive income sub-attribute. Passive income was a key method for acquiring skill points and was necessary for the growth of a skill master. He realized that he needed to complete this mission. He needed 100 SP. He asked how many SP he currently had. SP window. He checked and saw that he had 70 SP available. Since he received 10 SP per day, this was already passive income. He quickly calculated and estimated that he could complete the mission in just 3 days. With a determined look on his face, he already knew how he would spend his free time. Just then, someone knocked on the door. He quickly turned his head. A voice outside said that his room service had arrived. With yogurt still on his face, Ju-yeon excitedly replied that he would be right there. He had planned to stay at the hotel, but no. This was the beginning of his operation to discover new combinations of skills to copy. He watched skill videos non-stop, with a banquet spread out before him. Crab, marinated beef, chicken, pizza, everything he thought he deserved. Devouring the juicy roast, he analyzed the skills on the screen. Skills of rank S or higher were practically extinct. Even if he copied them, they would disappear at midnight, so he needed to record them on video to use whenever he wanted. He remembered Muhammad Al and thought gratefully. Muhammad Al, the guy who casually revealed an SSS-Rank skill. This guy is a sacrificial angel. He continued to ponder. If he levels up, maybe he can use the copied skills permanently. Still watching the video, he organized everything. He decided to divide the skills into those he would use now and those he would save for later. It would be better to make playlists. He looked through various abilities. Body enhancement and the teleportation video. That definitely goes in the playlist. And as he did so, he thought it was the best thing in the world. Shopping for skills, or that's how he spent the whole day. After hundreds of dishes, the boy looked like a giant piglet. He ate so much that it seemed like he had devoured the whole world. He couldn't swallow even one more pea. Whistling cheerfully, he hummed. Registered as a healer in the user association. Done. He plopped down on the bed with a silly grin. Healing enhances magic. If he could use all of this, how much would his value increase? He even had some mischievous thoughts. Would the gorgeous beauty send him a love call? The next day, the young warrior girl, now fully recovered, came to visit our protagonist. As soon as she saw him, she said she was very grateful for that day. But our hero just stared at her, completely lost, having no idea who she was or why she was talking to him. She asked if he remembered her, and he replied suspiciously that he did not. Joan could only think that she was too beautiful to have anything to do with him. Awkwardly, she tried to refresh his memory. She said that a few days ago, her brother had brought her to him for healing. Then it clicked. Ah, the one with the severed arm. He couldn't help but think that he considered her his girlfriend, considering how much he had spent. But she was his sister. She thanked him again, saying she was glad she could thank him. If it weren't for him, she would probably be dead. Then she quickly asked if he was in any groups. Her brother already looked annoyed. Without hesitation, Ju-yeon replied that he didn't. She continued by asking about a guild. Again, no. The girl said that was perfect. She looked excited. As soon as he confirmed that he was solo, she made an offer. Their group needed a temporary healer. Ju-yeon panicked internally. He wasn't ready to go into the field yet. He had to refuse. But the girl was a natural-born warrior and turned on the charm. She suggested that if he had time, they could grab a coffee and chat. She asked for his number so she could text him. Jong was already hooked, almost in love. But the playful mood was shattered by a cry of pain that made them both look back. A man in armor was dragging his friend and desperately shouting that he had been beaten up and asking for help. He needed healing to remove the negative effects. Jung took the chance to escape and ran to help, using his healing magic. The warrior thanked him and paid him. Meanwhile, the girl didn't take her eyes off Jong for a second. He felt as if she was devouring him with her gaze. Slowly turning around, he looked at her and said, almost in tears, apologizing. But group battles were too much for his level. Trying to calm him down, she replied that they had an S-rank tank and an S-rank mage. They would carry him through, no problem. But Ju-yeon was quicker. He grabbed his money, rolled up his small mat, and took off. As the boy ran away, apologizing, she tried to stop him, but it was too late. Disappointed and with tears in his eyes, he thought that even she, an S-rank, had nearly died in a D-rank field not long ago. As he ran away, wads of cash flew through the air along with his tears. He had only one thought in his head. When would he ever be able to join a party with such a beauty again? The scene changed. As night fell, the city lights contrasted with the darkness outside. From the balcony of his luxurious suite, Ju-yeon settled comfortably, enjoying the view and sipping a cold drink. A satisfied smile spread across his face. The long-awaited day had finally arrived. At exactly midnight, a notification popped up on his phone. It informed him that he had received 10 SP thanks to the first level of passive income. The system asked if he wanted to upgrade his passive income to the second level. Without hesitation, he began the process, spending 100 SP. Several notifications appeared one after another. A unique feature that had evolved. The second level of passive income generates 50 SP every day at midnight. Ju-yeon's eyes lit up with excitement. He was amazed that SP generation had increased fivefold. Now it was time to check the mission reward. The system displayed that the training mission had been completed. A unique trait had been activated. The copied skill was assigned a random unique trait. Taking a sip of soda, he thought. A unique trait. It reflects the user's inclinations. Users could acquire the same skills through books, but the effectiveness varied greatly from person to person, mainly due to their unique traits. Without the corresponding trait, the skill would work less well than it did for the original user. He thoughtfully placed the full glass of cola on the table nearby. Although the meteorite on the learning map was an exception, he wondered whether the copied skills would now have unique traits as well. He considered this to be cheating, but the word random began to bother him a little. The system analyzed the light of restoration, which allowed Ju-yeon to perform almost miraculous feats on the battlefield. After a few seconds, Ju-yeon looked at his phone, thinking. He decided he had to test it himself to be sure, but he wondered what he should try first. He thought it was high time to stop being just a hired healer. Then he glanced at another window. It was a training mission that required Ju-yeon to hunt monsters using the copied skill. It was a step toward becoming a true master of skills. Looking at the cityscape, Ju-yeon muttered that it seemed to him as if someone was watching him in real time and sending him these missions. Then he opened the playlist of saved skills on his phone and declared that since it was time to hunt, it was time to start, after which he clicked on a specific video. It featured a little girl with a fireball. He hesitated, wondering if he should copy this skill just for practice. But soon he smiled excitedly. He decided that it didn't matter. And since it was accidental, he didn't expect anything amazing. He just decided to test it out. He activated the skill copy, successfully obtaining Fireball. Summons a fireball that can be launched within a 20-meter radius. Flames surrounded Ju-yeon as he studied the new features. Cognitive impairment of enemies for 60 seconds, and F-rank slowdown, reducing mobility for the same amount of time. Surprised, he asked if there was really someone behind those mission windows. The next day, Ju-yeon arrived at the entrance to the Tagvalon sheep farm, dressed in a modest brown coat so as not to attract attention. Seeing the barrier, he thought that this was the boundary between the field and reality. He took a deep breath to calm himself, still pondering. It was modest, but he mentally noted that he had spent everything he had on equipment. He assured himself that everything would be fine. His eyes widened with determination. He said to himself, "Well, goodbye, hired healer. Hello, hunter." Later, comments about the video began to appear online. Users asked each other if they had heard about the fire psychopath who destroyed monsters with fireballs on a sheep farm. They tried to recruit him into their guild, but he refused. They assumed that he didn't like the nickname Fire Psychopath. 3 guys appeared like vultures, offering bait disguised as privileges. They said, "Join our guild, and we'll give you VIP treatment." Ju-yeon read all this without a hint of excitement. He thought he didn't do it for that reason at all. Surrounded by light, he said that he was the one who rejected the offer of the beautiful S-rank. But the reality turned out to be much more cruel. Ju-yeon was the one who left, crying with disappointment. Remembering the hunting ground, he wondered if he had really been smiling while hunting. He remembered attacking a medium-sized bull with 3 horns, launching fireballs, but the monsters seemed immune. No matter how many times he hit them, they did not fall. That's when Ju-yeon changed tactics and started laughing like a crazy psychopath. That's where all those comments came from. Now, back in his luxurious apartment, he reflected, feeling a little guilty. He admitted that he really did remember how excited he was that the monsters were so easy to destroy. Then a series of notifications appeared in front of him. Training mission completed. Skill copier subfeature activated. Watching the video of his own hunt, he thought he was about to stop because he had run out of mana. Suddenly, one post caught his attention. He exclaimed excitedly that there was a post here about a boss raid and recruiting equipment and a team. Ju-yeon looked at his hand, saying that it was true. It all depended on his equipment. Thanks to it, he could spam fireballs non-stop. But then he was struck by a wave of surprise. He jumped up from his chair in a second, fell to his knees, clenched his fists, tears in his eyes, and shouted. He remembered that he needed to bow down again to the #1 player in the world, Hamid. A few days ago, there was a frantic hunt. A group of warriors fought a huge beast, trying to coordinate their efforts. One shouted that he would hold the aggro. Another commanded the mages to stay behind. A third warned the melee fighters not to intercept the aggro. Amidst the chaos, the main character received a notification. A training quest. To hunt a field boss monster. He stood behind, smiling with excitement. He asked if that meant they wanted him to hunt the boss. Before him raged a beast, ready to tear everyone to pieces, when a powerful burst of fire hit it in the chest, throwing it back and saving all the warriors in front of him. Everyone turned to see who had done it. All eyes were on Ju-yeon, who was holding 2 burning fireballs on his fingertips. And just like that, he began to roast the bear. The beast howled in pain, burning alive in the flames. It seemed that Ju-yeon enjoyed watching the monster suffer. After a few more fireballs, the beast finally fell. The nearby warriors watched in shock. They couldn't believe it. The boss had fallen, but this was only the beginning. Suddenly the boss rose again, now twice its original size. He roared so loudly that several notification windows appeared. You have been subjected to the roar of the obsidian bear. All stats are reduced by 3. Strength is reduced by 2. The warriors froze. Their stats were falling from fear. Dexterity was reduced by 2. Evasion was reduced by 2. Cries of despair rang out. Someone shouted that he had gone berserk, that this was a special phase. One warrior asked how much damage they had done. Others trembled, unable to answer. One complained that his strength had fallen and he couldn't even lift his sword. Another urged everyone to stay calm. The boss growled again, swiping its claws. But the swordsman barely blocked the blow. Even so, most of the warriors were paralyzed. A dense purple aura surrounded them, and in the midst of it all, Ju-yeon stood motionless, staring at something. It was another notification. An additional quest. Copy the boss's special skill in 1 attempt. The copied skill was Obsidian Bear's Roar. All life forms within a 30-meter radius receive a debuff. The user's stats increase by +3 for each life form affected by the roar. Struck by the power, he whispered the command to copy the skill. The system began to work, and the protagonist, watching the boss deal with the warriors around him. The guy thought he could use this without any conditions. It doesn't even consume mana. He thought it was just crazy. His eyes glowed red, and his tone changed as he stated that this skill would disappear at midnight anyway. He added that if he didn't use it now, he would be an idiot. Then he activated the skill. Obsidian Bear's Roar. Once again, the warriors were attacked by the bear, but this time it was unleashed by the main character himself. Everyone was stunned. No one knew exactly what had happened. The warriors could only groan, complaining that he had roared again and their stats were now garbage. Meanwhile, the boy became much stronger, gaining a +9 to strength, a +9 to agility, and a +9 to vitality. In front of him, the bear, like the warriors, also felt the effects of the attack. They all froze completely, trying to comprehend what had just happened. After a few seconds, Ju-yeon raised his hand and pointed his index finger upward. Then he created a massive fireball and launched it at the boss without hesitation. The warriors watched the scene with wide eyes, unable to believe how the protagonist had received several notifications. Ju-yeon leveled up after defeating the field boss. The victory was confirmed by the system, which showed that the boss's special skill had been copied, and that the training was now officially complete. Now, in sub-training mode, his eyes shone with excitement. Filled with adrenaline, he thought to himself that this was truly exciting. Finally, the huge monster collapsed to the ground, now truly defeated. The warrior shouted in delight that it was insane. Frightened by the sudden reaction, Ju-yeon pulled his hood up to hide his face, trying not to be recognized. As he was being greeted, a strange feeling ran through his body. It seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite place where these confused memories came from. Shortly after, the system announced to all players that the Obsidian Bear's soul had been absorbed. All bodies began to glow, including Ju-yeon's, and each player received a permanent strength point. As this was happening, Ju-yeon thought, so this is what the soul of a field boss. They say that the boss's level is at least 10 higher than the field itself. If someone tries to compensate for the gap by getting help from a more experienced player, the contribution system does not allow anyone to take the loot. The boss's body simply disappears. In the midst of all this danger, where you risk your life, there is only one reason why players face these bosses. Rewards! Suddenly someone shouted excitedly, holding a pair of leather gloves. The boss's item had dropped. The great boss lay lifeless on the ground. Around him were various items and gold coins. Items worth hundreds of coins, along with valuable materials that the boss's body provides. A field boss is literally a body made of gold. Ju-yeon was excited. He thought, wow, his power had finally increased too. And besides, everyone who joined the battle received a permanent stat boost from the boss's soul. At that moment, the group approached Ju-yeon, calling him a mage. They thanked him for hunting. Great job. This attack was a huge success. This time, the MVP was the raid leader, the mage, as expected of a fire psychopath. But Ju-yeon didn't like one of the last comments. Shortly after, the warrior who picked up the gloves approached him. He said he was prepared to suffer when the boss went berserk. But Ju-yeon's damage was so insane that they came through unscathed. He added that everyone had done a good job. Then he opened the item status window. The Shadow Bear gloves were an armor item with defense and strength, as well as a berserk skill if health was below 30%. The thoughtful guy handed the gloves to Ju-yeon, acknowledging that the item was excellent overall, but the activation condition was a bit complicated. Ju-yeon was disappointed. Having your health below 30% was like walking a tightrope over an abyss. The warrior then added that the boss items and materials would be distributed by the player association. He asked if there were any objections. At that moment, the man in the white suit approached them and announced that he wanted to buy the boss item and would pay 90% of the estimated value in cash. He was accompanied by several bodyguards in black suits. The young woman pointed at them, asking if they were the ones. Some of the warriors did not seem to recognize them. So she explained that people say these guys appear like ghosts to buy boss items whenever they drop. They are called boss item hunters. Apparently, they take everything. But she added that if they pay cash, it's a good deal for them. Ju-yeon wasn't thrilled about this. He wondered what these high-level guys were up to. He thought that there were all kinds of crazy people out there. Then the man in the white suit snapped his fingers. Immediately, another man next to him opened a suitcase full of cash and announced that payment could be made immediately. Ju-yeon's eyes lit up at the sight of the money. He quickly changed his mind. He decided that no matter what they were up to, cash in hand was always the best deal. Now he just needed to hunt like crazy, and the deal was done. Later, Ju-yeon was back near the hunting grounds, offering his services as a healer. He listlessly announced that he was selling treatment, but something was clearly bothering him. He couldn't stop thinking about what was the point of earning nearly 10 million won. The image of the young saleswoman came to his mind. She led him to a set of armor, and with an excited smile, she said that the armor he was looking for was here. But when Ju-yeon saw the price of the item, he felt as if his soul had been ripped from his body. Still excited, the girl added that there were only 2 sets left. But the guy was already trembling with despair. With tears in his eyes, he ran out of the store, shouting, begging her to wait a little longer, and swearing that he would return. Alone and almost in a stupor, Ju-yeon muttered. He thought that if he had the obsidian bear roar with oblivion applied, he could just focus on hunting. Then he looked at his skills in the system. The copy skill was good, but it was a pity that the wolf roar only required half health. Nevertheless, he had a lot of fun in another field. He remembered laughing like a madman, shouting that he would burn them all. Stretching, he muttered to himself. He decided that since there were no customers yet, he might as well spend some of his accumulated status points in SP, then considered his options. He thought that if he stuck to the fantasy theme, a swordsman would be the best choice. But this wasn't a game with extra lives. He had no choice. Then something on the screen caught his attention. His magic stat had increased from 41 to 48, and if he used 500 SP, he could evolve the skill, making not 1 copy, but 2. Ju-yeon looked at the status window with shining eyes. 2 copies available. Amazing. Immediately after that, a notification popped up. The daily training mission quest had been activated. He could earn more. The Skillmaster subline was also activated. The first daily quest appeared with a reward of 80 SP. He wondered with curiosity what would happen if he copied the same skill twice. The guy decided to test his theory by activating the copy skill while watching a video, trying to copy the healing light. A new trait appeared, a unique trait called preservation, which reduced mana costs by 5%. He wondered if copying it again would only change the trait, or would he get two different versions of the same skill? Without hesitation, he tried again, and it worked. It was a jackpot. Proudly holding his advertising signs, the guy thought, "It's now or never, healing for sale. XP buff, plus 5%. Duration 5 hours, only 1,000,001. Several researchers were wandering around nearby. Ju-yeon took a deep breath and shouted for everyone to hear. He added that deals like this don't happen every day. Today's buff is limited in time. Of course, this attracted attention. Whispers began to spread through the crowd. Some asked if it was real. Does this experience buff actually exist? Another remarked that they had never heard of such a thing before. They speculated that he might just take the money and run. Outwardly, Ju-yeon looked confident, smiling brightly and holding his sign like a trophy. But inside, he was screaming, urging these idiots not to hesitate. He thought, "I don't have time, so pounce on me like a hungry pack and let me earn those millions already." Then someone approached, catching his attention. The figure came close. It was the girl he had cured a few days ago. With a gentle smile, she took off her hood and greeted him. She said, "Long time no see, huh?" And without losing her teasing tone, she delivered a direct blow to the protagonist's heart. The girl asked if he was still not in the mood to hunt with them. Ju-yeon could barely bear the girl's radiant aura. He was almost blinded. Without wasting any time, he stated that he was only open for the services listed on the sign. The girl did not seem very pleased with the answer. She just looked at him and sighed. Then she smiled again and teased him, saying that he didn't have his first customer yet. She said that Appa and she would buy a buff. Her brother, standing right behind her, didn't seem thrilled with this decision. Although surprised, Ju-yeon kept his composure, picked up his sign, and modestly replied, inviting them to come over. Seeing the guy's behavior, the brother commented suspiciously that he had a feeling this had happened before. Ju-yeon used healing light on the two of them, and the magic happened right before everyone's eyes. When he finished, the girl handed him her business card and asked him to call her later. Her name and number were written on the card. She hadn't given up yet and said that they really needed a skilled healer. As the brother and sister walked away from Ju-yeon, the beautiful girl shouted for everyone to hear. "Hey everyone, this buff is real." She added that all the conditions were true. A few seconds later, chaos broke out. Everyone wanted the guy's buff. Seeing the amount of money he could make, Ju-yeon couldn't hold back. He thought she had helped him so kindly, thanked Hye-ji, and admitted that she was amazing. As Kim Hye-ji and her brother walked away, he looked at her with a puzzled expression. Finally, the man in armor spoke. He asked why she had called him a complete idiot earlier, and now continued to approach the newcomer without any equipment. She simply replied that she had already told him. Their group, with her dealing explosive damage, and them, tanking, had a good balance between attack and defense. But thinking of Ju-yeon, she added that they needed a healer. Crossing the barrier into the monster zone, she concluded that, in addition, he had a new type of experience buff. She said there was a good chance he had a really useful, unique trait. But her brother was still skeptical and said he was still just a beginner. Faced with hundreds of lizard monsters, the young sorceress sighed, saying that it made it even more meaningful before others realized his potential, and the battle began. The young sorceress shouted, summoning a fiery storm and sending it forward. The stream of flames swept away everything in front of it, incinerating the monsters. In the background, her brother in armor could only sigh. She winked at him, trying to reassure him, and said, "Who knows? A player like him could become an incredible ranker in the future." After finishing his work with buffs, Ju-yeon returned to the store and bought his first armor. Happy, he declared that this was why he worked hard and earned money. The system notified him that the set effect had been activated. Reading the details, the guy wondered if it would be better to have passive income than to depend on hard work. Then he upgraded his passive income skill from level 2 to level 3. Ju-yeon's cheeks turned red. Even so, a terrifying grin spread across his face from ear to ear. Excited, he did some calculations. Now he would accumulate SP even while standing still, and decided to check. The second level trait cost 2,000 SP. He had to calculate ahead. Soon, the guy became discouraged. The third level daily quest cost 3,000 SP, and he was shocked as he continued to analyze the windows. He counted a total of 9,800 SP. Since he earned 200 per day, it would take him an exhausting 49 days to complete everything. He had to come up with a strategy to stop thinking about it. Nevertheless, he continued to stare at the sky, muttering and glowing faintly. Passers-by thought Ju-yeon was quite strange. One of them thought, wow, he talks to himself a lot. Ju-yeon also realized something and shouted that he needed to improve his stats if he wanted to make good progress. Ignoring the men staring at him, he shouted even louder. He said he'd better go and fight the field boss now. The protagonist almost forgot, but remembered to put on his old brown cloak, as his face was becoming quite well known as a healer. And to complete his disguise, he put on glasses and declared that it was time to act like a hidden master again. Soon, the guy found himself in a completely dirty hunting field. Trying to clean his boots, he muttered, "Damn, why does this field have to be on a swamp?" It was the Gararam Bay field, rank F. Analyzing the terrain, the guy thought that with such a landscape, melee fighters and tanks would be useless. Ju-yeon compared this place to the field he had been in before. The sheep farm was clean and pleasant, probably because it was for beginners. Holding his cloak, he slowly walked through the swamp and muttered that if only there were no level restrictions on this field, he wouldn't have such difficulty collecting boss souls. An interesting fact: the level restriction for F-rank fields was level 19. Only 5 boss souls could be absorbed per rank. Ju-yeon remembered the lesson he had read. The most important thing for any field boss raid, and this applied to all types of raids, was that these battles were extremely difficult and dangerous. That was why there was rule number 1. Never join random groups recruited by the community, ever. Completely ignoring this advice, Ju-yeon muttered that he had been told not to join random community groups. But it had worked against the Shadow Bear, so it should be fine now. Crossing his arms and lacking the motivation to continue, he soon announced that he wanted to go home. He saw several warriors talking to beautiful female warriors. Biting his lips slightly, the young man thought with tears in his eyes. Had he come on a raid or to watch a group date? Soon someone approached him. When Ju-yeon turned around, the other warrior was shocked to realize that it was a guy. The cloak and the fact that he had his back turned had deceived him. But there was something else. Ju-yeon felt disappointed and thought that all he had done was switch his name and nickname, and wondered if that was the problem. But then he realized what was going on. He thought, wait, did I accidentally take one of the girls' spots in this 5 versus 5 raid date? At that moment, the protagonist looked at the guy who had been there before and realized why he had approached him. The guy couldn't even finish his thought. This raid was a complete mess. In the end, Ju-yeon just coldly remarked to the leader of that group that he should have checked the players more carefully before recruiting them. The blonde guy in armor, apparently the leader, held the girl in his arms and soon announced. He said, "Okay, now that everyone is here, let's start the briefing." Each warrior was already paired with someone. Behind them, the protagonist watched the scene with his arms crossed and a hurt expression on his face, thinking that this was unlikely to end with just a group meeting. The blonde man continued to explain that some of them might already be familiar with the strategy, but he would explain it again to be sure. The boss of Gararam Bay, a mud crab, gets faster every time it is hit with a debuff, so he asked not to use them. Even self-inflicted debuffs, such as loss of life fluid, affect him, so we need to defeat him without injury if possible. Applying debuffs increases the mud crab's stats, and if it accumulates enough, it will use a special ability. Excited, the blonde guy said he had captured the mud crab in Gararam Bay 8 times already, so relax. The excited girl replied that she trusted him. Behind them, the protagonist wondered if its special ability was to gain stats from debuffs. Suddenly, he perked up, thinking that if that was the case, then it was a buffing debuff. It might be more useful than he thought. Meanwhile, the warriors continued to flirt, which only annoyed the protagonist even more. That's when the monster appeared. It looked like a shell with a mouth full of sharp teeth. The blonde warrior rushed forward and cut them in half. He was skilled, or at least he looked that way. In reality, the beasts were tiny. Ju-yeon watched the monsters with a stunned expression on his face. The other warriors continued to attack the small creatures as if their lives depended on it. The scene was so absurd that the protagonist thought to himself, "They're acting so almighty, hunting something that looks like an ingredient for clam chowder." Thinking they were doing a great job, the blonde turned to the girls and declared that as their senior, he would protect them all, so they shouldn't worry. But then a real monster appeared. Giant tentacles burst out of the ground, spreading in all directions. And the first to run away was the blonde warrior. Ju-yeon stared at him in disbelief. He said he would protect them, so where was he running to? An archer sprang into action. One of them shouted that the mud crab only appeared after enough monster corpses had accumulated, so they had to make sure they destroyed all the trash too. A rain of arrows fell on the monsters. Everything seemed under control. The team seemed to be handling the creatures, even if they looked problematic at first. The beast lay on the ground, riddled with arrows. The protagonist thought he understood. They had enough skill to be smug on the F-rank field, so when would the main course appear? It was then that a massive worm appeared, devouring the fallen monsters. It was dozens of times larger than those destroyed by the archers. The real test began. Everyone switched to defense mode. Shouts rang out that they were starting the raid now, to get into formation. More and more monsters appeared from the depths, one of them being a giant crab. Panic ensued. Assessing the situation, someone shouted a warning. The mud crab only moves sideways, so keep it in front of you and only move forward and backward. At that moment, Ju-yeon's eyes fixed on the creatures. He stood with his eyes wide open. Many incredible monsters appeared. He carefully analyzed their characteristics. The skill resistance to skill change allowed him to resist changes caused by buffs and debuffs. For each stacked effect, all of his characteristics increased by 1 point. A broad grin spread across his face. It was a jackpot. Several monsters began to chase the players. There were squids, crabs, and stingrays. Chaos ensued, and everyone rushed to flee. One of the players shouted, cursing, that the crab was moving sideways and everyone needed to retreat. Although the crab was only moving sideways, it was constantly changing direction, which frightened the players even more. While the warriors retreated, the archers tried to slow down the monster's advance with a rain of arrows. A short distance away, the protagonist watched closely the attack patterns of both the monsters and the players. If the skill description does not specify conditions or duration, it means that it is always active. A passive ability that increases stats as buffs or debuffs are applied. The boy looked genuinely excited by his analysis. Meanwhile, further behind, the blonde warrior tried to coordinate the attacks. He asked to use only physical attacks. The protagonist looked at him with contempt. He wondered why the main tank was so far behind. Then he remembered what the man had said earlier. The boss of Garoram Bay, the mud crab, becomes faster with each debuff applied. Therefore, he forbade the application of any debuffs, especially those that are self-inflicted, such as loss of life fluid, as they also count. He insisted that they should kill him with as few wounds as possible. So Ju-yeon thought to himself that if the physical attacks continued in the same vein, it would lead to a loss of life fluid, and that was also a debuff. The archers were still in position, firing arrows non-stop. The volley struck the crab's hard shell. The protagonist noticed that the tank should draw aggro, while the others attacked from a distance. But something was wrong here. He understood why the team leader had assigned so many ranged fighters, but he thought it was too slow. He wondered how they were going to defeat a creature with such monstrous armor without damaging it. Soon, the blond man intervened. He stepped forward importantly and began to warm up his arms, announcing that it seemed to be his turn now. The protagonist just wondered if he should already be there, on the front line. Then the blonde man turned to the girl, saying that she owed him, and asked her to give him a buff. The girl struck a cute pose and cheerfully replied that a buff filled with Yoo Ju's love was on its way. From a distance, the protagonist simply watched this flirting. He closed his eyes and decided it was better to let them continue playing there. He concluded that the correct answer was to destroy everything in one fell swoop. At that moment, a wave of lightning burst forth from the protagonist's right side. It was Yoo Ju using her skill on the blonde swordsman. Ju-yeon's face paled with surprise. It was an SS-Rank skill called Shining Power. It imposed 4 random buffs on the target, 1 for every 50 mana points spent. The activation cost was 1,000 mana. Now, the blonde man's body glowed with golden energy. Ju-yeon's eyes widened. An SS-Rank buff skill in a place like this. Earlier in the store, the saleswoman had asked excitedly if the customer was recording broadcasts or something like that. The boy got nervous, thinking that she had recognized him from the video. Without hesitation, he quickly replied that he didn't do such things. The saleswoman then explained that she had heard that it was now fashionable among those who roamed the fields to record videos for UserTube. Then he realized that she just wanted to sell something. The young saleswoman immediately announced that they had a recommended product prepared especially for customers like him. The protagonist tried to stop her. He said he really didn't need it. But it was too late. She had already started her sales pitch. In the end, she sold him glasses with a camera. Returning to the present, he adjusted his glasses, observing the girl's skill. These glasses were an item that Ju-yeon had bought specifically to record boss fights. Using resistance to change, which increases stats when buffs are applied, along with Shining Power, a buff skill. He realized that if he used them together, he would become invincible. His eyes sparkled. He thought it was amazing. Then he wondered why such a buff was in a place like this. The swordsman, after a long delay, finally drew his sword and announced that he would now attract the monster's attention. The protagonist couldn't help but grin at the scene. Before leaving, the blonde man looked at him and asked Young-ju to strike the beast with a powerful attack. At that moment, the boy launched a barrage of fireballs at the giant crab. All the monsters were engulfed in flames. The protagonist apologized to the swordsman in his mind. He thought, "Sorry for ruining your heroic moment, but I'm taking the main course." He added that he had saved his trump card for this very moment. In a matter of seconds, Ju-yeon clenched his fist, and a series of explosions erupted like fireworks. It was a D-rank skill called Explosion. It detonated the coals within a 20-meter radius. Suddenly, a wonderful and familiar smell filled the battlefield. Someone commented that this monster smelled like those dishes where rice is mixed inside a crab shell. Meat is placed on top, and a huge piece is bitten off. The crab, now lying belly up with a giant hole in the center, looked completely cooked. If it weren't a monster, it would be the perfect dish. Even so, the smell was tempting. In the background, the blonde warrior stood stunned, but did not give up. He moved forward with his sword in an attacking position and shouted, ordering everyone to retreat. He warned that the monster could fly into a rage at any moment. The swordsman began hacking at the creature's remains in a frenzy. It was a pitiful scene. A glowing halo appeared above the crab's head, signaling its defeat. Several items appeared around it. The beast was killed. A system notification appeared. Absorption of the soul of the field boss, the F-rank mangrove crab. The reward was 1 point of mana. 1. In the background, Yoo-ju excitedly shouted to the blonde man that he was magnificent. But everyone else, including the protagonist, considered his actions pathetic. Suddenly, an unexpected notification popped up in front of the protagonist. Resistance to change. An A-rank skill was registered in the boss's skill list. He couldn't contain his excitement. He thought, "Cool, I got everything I wanted." Now all he had to do was go back and test it out. He was sure it would be perfect. But just as he was about to return home, a group of warriors approached him. It seemed they all had something to say to Ju-yeon. One of them suggested that his unique trait was at least rank A or S, which was correct. He added that it was an incredibly cool pull. Another thanked him, saying that thanks to him, they were able to easily capture the soul. The girl even asked for the boy's phone number. Ju-yeon was surprised by the sudden attention. Shortly after, he received an invitation. They asked him if he had any plans after that and suggested going somewhere for a short while. In the background, the blonde swordsman shouted, trying to control the situation. He reminded them that they still needed to divide the loot and demanded that they return. The blonde man began to tear up, touched that at least one person had not abandoned him. He told Yoo-ju that at least she had remained on his side, but the girl replied cheerfully. She said that it was Yoon-ju who had won the fight, and she asked if he shouldn't get the biggest share. The blonde man was stunned. Then everyone began to agree with this opinion. They said they didn't mind giving everything to Yoon-ju. Another player added that if Yoon-ju got everything, he could take his share too. Meanwhile, the man in the black suit watched everything from afar. In front of him lay the defeated crab boss. A little ahead, a blonde swordsman sat on the ground, and a girl with an S-rank skill behind him tried to comfort him. The other warriors walked alongside Ju-yeon, admiring his performance against the boss. The man in the suit then contacted someone via a device. He reported that the boss's item had not dropped during the invasion of Garoram Bay. He said they were heading to the next invasion field. Unnoticed by anyone, he disappeared from the scene, slipping away behind the defeated blonde man. Yoo-ju, meanwhile, was looking up at the sky. Her expression suddenly changed. She noticed something dangerous, although the scene did not reveal what it was. On another day, Ju-yeon was roasting wild boars in the monster field using his fireballs. Suddenly, the system notified him that the daily mission had been completed and 300 SP had been received. Exhausted, he threw himself to the ground to catch his breath. Looking at the clouds in the sky, he thought about how long it would take to level up the sample to level 3. He remembered the buffs he had received, the effect of the SS-rank shining power and the A-rank resistance to change. Then he reasoned that the combination of rank A resistance to change and rank SS shining power would give him insane buffs. But the problem was, before finishing his thought, he opened the status window. The second-level sample window appeared. He quickly realized that with the second-level sample, he didn't have enough copies. His stats were growing, but he didn't have any real skills to use. He decided that the only way was to upgrade the sample to the 3rd level. Ju-yeon began rolling around on the ground. The boy needed more SP, so he threw a tantrum and shouted that earning SP through daily missions was lame because it was so slow. He pouted and looked up at the sky, praying to whoever might be watching him. He asked, "Come on, isn't there a normal admin who will give him a good mission?" Nothing happened. He remained lying on the ground, waiting for something. Finally, he sighed, saying that it would never happen. He asked himself what he was doing with his life. But suddenly, several notification windows appeared in front of him. He sat up excitedly, staring at one of them. The notification said that the main training mission had been activated with a reward of 4,000 SP. But soon his expression changed. Ju-yeon asked incredulously, 4,000? He wondered what kind of main mission this was. Suddenly, a shadow fell over him. He looked up in horror. Someone was smoking on the balcony when the lights suddenly went out. Even the city, previously bathed in sunlight, was plunged into darkness. Countless monsters invaded the skies, throwing the population into panic. It was a special mission, a special F-rank mission. Candle Sky Island, entry level 1 to 39. Ju-yeon remained seated in the middle of the hunting field grass, surrounded by notification windows. In a matter of moments, countless huge black beasts filled the skies. The last notification clarified the mission. Clear the special field for the survival of Earth and humanity. The scene switched. Everything was in chaos. Breaking news reported that a large-scale Class F special field, Heavenly Island Canal, had appeared over Seoul in Gyeonggi Province. The pillars of light were believed to be portals leading to Heavenly Island Canal. The user association went into emergency control mode. Flights in Incheon and Gimpo were suspended indefinitely. Residents living in the field's area of influence complained about the lack of sunlight, began interviewing the heroes. One of them introduced himself as Kim, a Class C user. He expressed the opinion that since the entry level to the field is only 1 to 39, the association should speed up the issuance of permits to enter the portal. But interrupting all channels, sensational news broke on the screens. Urgent reports indicated that special fields had appeared simultaneously in several places around the world. As for Japan, nighttime broadcasts covered the sudden appearance of a piece of land half the size of South Korea near Tokyo. People watching the broadcast commented that since the Japanese special field was not a heavenly island, it must be nice not to worry about sunlight. But another responded angrily, calling his interlocutor an idiot and saying that was not the problem. While the two men argued, Ju-yeon watched another disturbing report about the Class B special field. Several level 70 monsters were crossing into Tokyo. Huge ogres appeared on the screen, destroying everything in their path. The news suggested that this could be the end of humanity. Someone pointed out that level 70 was almost Class S, which was true. Ju-yeon put his phone away. Waiting for the signal to cross the street, the two men continued talking. The other clarified that the entry level was from 41 to 70. It seemed like madness was everywhere. As soon as the pedestrian signal turned green, on the other side of the street, the man answered questions at a press conference surrounded by reporters. He stated that the User Association receives active government support, so they can assess the fields as quickly as possible. Ju-yeon continued walking, listening to the man's words in the background. He said that they intend to develop a strategy for clearing Heavenly Island Canal, including a reward offer. Trying to stick to his routine, Ju-yeon went to the equipment store. Observing the chaos around him, he could only think about what a mess it was. Later, while waiting to be served, Ju-yeon evaluated his options in front of the system windows. He wondered if he could get some SP in advance for the mission. After studying everything, the protagonist was determined, clenched his fist, and declared that he absolutely had to complete this mission. He had no choice. Soon, a saleswoman appeared with a small box and thanked Ju-yeon for waiting. When she opened the box, a golden glow illuminated the protagonist's face. Seeing the items, he couldn't help but think, wow, so this is what a 70 million won item looks like. Among the items was a skull-shaped ring. Another item was an equally sinister bracelet, the Cursed Mana bracelet. The saleswoman, visibly excited, asked with a smile if he was looking for the ring and the bracelet of Cursed Mana, two different accessories, right? Ju-yeon nodded and thoughtfully closed the small green box. He thought that the set would give him 200 additional mana, bringing his total reserve to 1,510. Even if his attributes decreased slightly, focusing exclusively on magic seemed safer. Suddenly, an idea popped into his head. He thought, now that I think about it, how much would armor cost? He asked the saleswoman directly what the approximate price of a set of D to C class armor would be. Smiling as if she were about to meet her monthly quota, she replied, 400 million won. While the young man was digesting the absurd amount, she asked if he wanted to buy armor as well. But Ju-yeon tactfully stood up and declined. He said that for now, he only needed accessories. As he headed for the exit, he couldn't help but think sarcastically that spending the equivalent of an entire house on battle gear was excessive. At the back of the store, the saleswoman politely said goodbye, thanking him for his purchase. In his raincoat, and now with a portable camera hanging around his neck, Ju-yeon headed for the monster field barrier. He stopped thoughtfully in front of the barrier. He asked himself if this was the entrance. He thought the glasses were really uncomfortable, so he used the rest of his money to buy a wearable camera. But maybe he shouldn't have waited so long to do that. At that moment, he remembered the sweet words of the saleswoman who was always pushing her products. With that thought, he sighed lightly, dismissed the idea, and took out his phone. He decided to check the community reviews before entering. The comments were alarming. One high-level user, whom the commenter knew, had been completely crushed and forced to retreat. Everyone was shocked by this place. Ju-yeon frowned, concerned. Judging by these reactions, this place seemed more like an S-class field than an F-class one. Despite this, he moved toward the barrier separating the human world from the monster world. Smiling, he said that those who had failed and fled were probably exaggerating. He convinced himself that it couldn't be that bad, right? Crossing the barrier, his body was filled with bright light. In the blink of an eye, he found himself kneeling on a huge green field, surrounded by small, harmless green creatures that looked like slimes. He watched the monsters and muttered that they weren't even attacking him, which made him want to sit down and eat his lunchbox. Enchanted by the scenery, he thought that perhaps this place was better than he had thought. At that moment, a desperate cry interrupted him. The warrior had been captured by a griffin-like creature, whose neck and part of its body were covered with stones. As he was being carried away, the warrior cried and begged for help. The creature let him go, and the fall proved fatal. Ju-yeon watched, paralyzed. He had no time or chance to help. Other creatures began to surround him, flying in the heavens. In response, the protagonist created 2 fireballs, ready to defend himself if necessary. Challenging the flying monsters, the young man looked at one of the beasts and warned that if it tried to approach, he would turn it into fried chicken. In the background, Ju-yeon heard the sounds of intense battle. Looking closely, he realized that all the monsters were heading to one point. Turning around, he saw a man with a giant blue shield, protecting his ally from griffin attacks. It was a brother and sister duo. A bunch of flying creatures were heading towards them. The tank distracted the beasts and protected the girl. Meanwhile, Kim Hee-ji hid behind him, waiting for the right moment to strike. At the right moment, her staff burst into flames, and she unleashed a powerful attack of fiery storm, instantly incinerating the griffins. Ju-yeon watched the scene, impressed. He thought, wow, the damage was incredibly strong. The protagonist looked at Kim Hee-ji with surprise. He admitted to himself that he already thought she was strong, but not that strong. After destroying the monsters, she continued to follow her brother, stretching. She noticed that it wasn't as difficult as she thought, but her brother warned her. He agreed, but asked her not to let her guard down so she wouldn't get hurt again. Meanwhile, Ju-yeon was thinking. So far, he had only copied the fireball spell. He wondered if he should copy this skill as well. Just then, a small green creature crept up behind him, and he didn't even notice. Kim Hee-ji, continuing her conversation with her brother, said that, honestly, if there had been a healer back then, she wouldn't have suffered so much, right? She added that the more she thought about it, the more she regretted it. She suggested that if she had recruited the healer she found earlier, the hunt would be much easier now. Suddenly, a scream caught the girl's attention. It was Ju-yeon, and the green creature had latched onto his leg. He couldn't hold back his desperate cries, demanding that it let go and stop rolling around on his leg. Noticing his brother's incredulous looks, he felt a chill run down his spine. He looked at them, and they all exchanged awkward glances. The little creature had already half-stuffed his leg into its mouth. Kim Hee-ji recognized Ju-yeon and raised her hands with an ironic smile. She said it was a pleasant surprise and that he looked a little busy. Ju-yeon bit his lip in frustration. This unexpected encounter couldn't have been more awkward. Meanwhile, the little green creature hung happily on the poor protagonist's leg. Shortly after, the little creature cried when Kim Hee-ji's brother grabbed it. On the other hand, the protagonist also had tears in his eyes as he silently thanked the warrior in armor for his help. Sitting on the ground and clutching the boots he had just bought for a fortune, the protagonist cried from the rush of emotions, lamenting that these boots were damn expensive. Meanwhile, the tank, whose name had not yet been revealed, watched the scene with a mixture of surprise and discomfort, wondering to himself if this was the healer he had met in the park. He wondered if Hedge was really going to try to get him back into the group again. The warrior looked at his sister, trying to figure out what she was planning. But seeing her excited face, he was sure of one thing. She was indeed going to try to recruit him again. Hedge approached the boy, leaving him speechless and completely cornered. She exclaimed, "Healer, wow, what luck to meet you again like this." Enthusiastically grabbing the protagonist's hand, she smiled and said that if they kept bumping into each other like this, it would seem as if fate itself was trying to bring them together. In the background, her brother sighed regretfully, while Ju-yeon shuddered inside. He thought anxiously that he just wanted to hunt a little today. He asked Haje to please let go of his hand. In desperation, he tried to break free. But Kim Hye-ji did not give up. In fact, at that moment, the girl essentially announced that she would definitely drag him along with her today. As the beauty shook the protagonist like a doll, the boy realized that this time he had no choice. He thought without any enthusiasm that it seemed he would have to use his last copy of Healing Light. With a resigned sigh, he said to the excited girl, "Okay, today I'll be your healer, but I need to do something first." He awkwardly announced to his brother and sister that he would be back soon. He said he needed to use the restroom. In reality, he wanted to watch a video about the skill. Everyone was shocked. Where would he go to the bathroom in the middle of a field? Everyone was shocked, and the main character's image was ruined. He thought to himself, if I want to copy the skill, I need to see the user. So he said he urgently needed to use the restroom. The scene switched, and later the hunt began. Griffins with their wild eyes and sharp instincts began to prepare for the attack, wielding huge stones. Meanwhile, the group of brother and sister, accompanied by the protagonist, was completely surrounded by creatures, flying around like predators waiting for the right moment to strike. The creatures threw a huge rock at the tank, which stood firm with its giant shield. Deep down, Ju-yeon thought that if he got any closer, he would turn into barbecue. He wondered if this creature was really capable of thinking. Suddenly, a herd of rhino monsters fiercely rushed at the protagonist. Ju-yeon was cornered, ready to take a head-on blow. But Kim Hye-ji kept her promise. With a huge leap, she stood in front of him, and before attacking, turned around and winked at Ju-yeon. Then she launched a powerful attack called Firewall against the enraged rhinos. Tirelessly, the girl continued to cast spells with her staff, one after another, shouting the names with determination: Fire Spear, Fire Rain. Each spell was more intense than the last, setting the surrounding field ablaze with uncontrollable fury. The beasts continued to gather, but in the end, everything was reduced to ashes. Her brother in armor soon scolded her, reminding her that he had told her not to attack alone. But Hedge tried to justify herself, saying that they had defeated them, so everything was fine. Ju-yeon just stood between them, staring at the charred remains of rhinos and griffins on the ground, muttering to himself that it seemed there was no place left for him to shine here. Intrigued by Kim Hedge's skills, Ju-yeon asked her directly, saying that it was incredible. He wondered if S-Class users usually had so many skills. At that moment, the protagonist also thought, if S-Class is like this, then how many skills would an X-Class user have? Excited, she gave him a thumbs up. She explained that most of them had been learned by purchasing skill books. And at that moment, the protagonist realized that, in the end, it all comes down to money. After that, the group continued hunting, now encountering a huge two-headed crocodile in the lake. Deep down, Ju-yeon was upset, with tears in his eyes. It was unbearable not to be able to attack a single monster while standing next to these brother and sister. Unable to contain himself, he launched a huge fireball straight at the crocodile's head. The brother and sister were shocked by the scale of the attack, and slowly turned to look at the boy they had considered to be just a healer. Ju-yeon knew that his spells were usually much smaller, at least 10 or even 20 times smaller than what he had just launched. If everything had been as usual, it would have gone unnoticed. But this was not the case. In despair, he watched the crocodile burn and wondered why the fireball had become so large. Kim Hedge approached him, bumping right into him. She demanded that Ju-yeon be honest, noting that his magical power was greater than hers, wasn't it? She asked if he was really a healer. He tried to hide it. He said it was just normal, but then he realized what had happened. Because of that unique random trait, the skill had activated much more powerfully than he had anticipated. It was an overload. Ju-yeon continued to try to justify himself to his brother and sister. He explained that although healers are already considered a respected class, they need to train their defensive skills, as they are necessary for leveling up. Heji frowned and insisted that he at least tell her how much mana he had. The boy nervously looked away. He smiled and said that it was enough. His brother in armor looked at him suspiciously. Ju-yeon could only think that there was nothing wrong with having a lot of mana, but he had to be careful. He also noticed the presence of several other warriors nearby and cautiously concluded that there were other users here. Meanwhile, the other warriors were mercilessly destroying defenseless green monsters that looked like slimes. In fact, it looked more like a massacre. Tired of this monotonous hunt, one of the players asked his teammate a question. He asked how much longer he would have to continue this nonsense. Holding his blade, the warrior scolded him. He said, "Hey, don't lose your vigilance and watch out for flying monsters." But the other one didn't seem to care. He complained that he hadn't come all this way just to kill slimes. He declared that his pride as a player was dying. One of the guy's friends pointed to the battle and suggested that they go fight one of those big guys and kill themselves. Suddenly, a system notification appeared for all players on the field. The number of living creatures eliminated on Sky Island had reached the conditions for summoning the boss. The Lord of Heavenly Island had awakened. A colossal creature with red eyes rose up. It had a third, even larger and redder eye in the center of the golden helmet it wore. The players on the monster field did not understand what was happening. Enchanted and frightened, they stared at the creature, trying to comprehend what it was. The creature hovered high in the heavens, and its gigantic body was now fully visible. The three warriors watched the vision, wondering if it was an angel. The mysterious creature still hung motionless in the air. Suddenly, it raised its arms, and countless golden chains separated from its body, scattering in all directions. A giant notification appeared for all players. Heavenly swords have been summoned. Ju-yeon watched everything closely. Reading the notifications, he panicked. He shouted, warning everyone that this was an area attack. Shortly after, countless razor-sharp swords began falling from the sky onto all the players. Acting quickly, brother Kim Hee-ji, whose name was still unknown, raised his blue shield to block the blows of the giant swords. The pressure was tremendous, but he held his ground, albeit with difficulty. The blades piled up around his shield, trying to break through the tank's barrier. Elsewhere on the field, chaos reigned. Warriors fell with cries for mercy. Some lost their legs, others their arms. It was a scene of pure despair. The protagonist group managed to withstand the attack, but the tank had used up almost all of its energy. Kim Hee-ji approached him with concern and asked if her brother was all right. Feeling pain throughout his body, he replied with difficulty that the sword lock had inflicted a debuff on him. He explained that all his stats, health, attack, defense, had dropped. While the warrior writhed in pain and his sister stood by him, the protagonist approached to begin the healing process. He suggested forgetting about the creature for now and healing him first. An intense golden light emanated from his hands, as he simultaneously shifted his gaze to the mysterious creature that had just awakened. This creature was level 59 and was called Hanel, Sword of Heaven. Faced with this monster, the protagonist instinctively clenched his teeth. Cold sweat rolled down his face as a clear sign of anxiety. While continuing to heal the tank warrior, he cautiously looked up at the sky and asked if they should flee. The brother and sister looked at the boy, not knowing how to respond. The scene abruptly changed. Back in the comfort of his luxurious room, Ju-yeon was carefully reading the news about the field he had fled from a few days ago. The boss of Sky Island appeared yesterday at noon, and his arrival was directly related to the number of monsters. When he appeared, he unleashed an attack of devastating proportions, resulting in instant carnage. The shocking scenes were recorded by a user who was live streaming at the time of the attack. Since then, the streamer's whereabouts and current condition remain unknown. Returning to the scene, the monster hovered in the air. People around him noticed him in fear and pointed at him. Suddenly, this half-monster, half-god, half-angel raised his hand. And when he raised his hands, one of his wings turned black. Chaos spread across the field of monsters. Screams filled the air. Despair was palpable, and the warriors asked if he was going to throw even more swords. He lamented that he would not be able to dodge it. Rain began to fall, which was strange for this situation. The warriors were intrigued. They asked if it was just rain and nothing more. But then someone noticed that the swords had become incredibly heavy. He cursed, realizing that this was another debuff. It became impossible to hold the swords in his hands. Green slimes trembled in the corners, but something else appeared in them. They were surrounded by a purple aura. Suddenly, their bodies began to open up. The beasts that once seemed cute turned into giant green monsters resembling predatory locusts, their red eyes fixed on the players, who could barely react. The creatures moved forward. Ju-yeon watched in shock and disgust. He thought it was impossible. He was amazed that it even strengthened the monsters. He noted that it was wise of him to run away. He reasoned that if this were a game, he would have extra lives, but this was reality. He would have to improve his physical characteristics as well. Suddenly, his phone rang. He jumped up and, looking at the screen, muttered in confusion. He wondered when he had saved Hedge's number. Despite his surprise, he answered. On the other end, a cheerful female voice greeted him. She said hello to Ju-yeon and introduced herself. She asked if he had returned to Sky Island since they last worked together. He replied no, and she added that she was thinking of going there again anyway. As they talked, Ju-yeon continued to watch the videos of monsters increasingly invading hunting grounds. Hedge continued, admitting that she still found it difficult to understand the boss's behavior patterns. She mentioned that there were rumors that, just like in Japan, monsters from Heaven Island were now descending directly onto Seoul. She emphasized that it was a race against time. He just listened, silently staring at the monitor screen. The girl continued and, getting straight to the point, said that a squad had been formed to attack Hanel. She asked if he wanted to join. The offer left him speechless, but his answer remained a secret. A few days later, several warriors gathered at the Marsh Field in Seoul Grand Park, Class D. They all looked extremely skilled. A lower-ranked warrior asked his comrade if the guy was a Class A user. He added that he had seen him on UserTube. His friend immediately replied that everyone here seemed to be Class B or higher. In the rear, the newbies whispered, wondering what these big shots were doing on a Class D field. Someone suggested that this was the squad sent to capture Hanel. He added that for them, it was just a warm-up. The atmosphere was tense and full of anticipation. Among the warriors with trembling eyes stood Ju-yeon. He asked himself if he really belonged here. He reasoned that he was wearing clothes different from those he wore as a mage, so everything should be fine. He just took off his cloak. Then he heard someone calling his name. It was Hedge, waving her hand next to her brother. Our protagonist exclaimed that he had finally met someone he knew. He approached and asked, pointing to himself. He clarified that the condition for participation was a class of at least B, and inquired whether someone with an F class like him could really be in this group. The boy thought about it. He reminded himself that he had registered with the association as a Class F healer in order to conceal his identity. But Hedge completely ignored this and replied, saying that he was at it again. She asked what kind of Class F healer used a Class C healing skill. She explained that removing debuffs was critical to this mission, so they were accepting everyone without any special conditions. Then she asked if it was time for the raid leader to arrive. At that moment, a man in armor appeared among the warriors. Everyone, even the most respected, fell silent before him. Hedge excitedly remarked that the brave leader of the warriors had finally arrived. Ju-yeon was stunned, the leader of the mission to conquer Hanel's territory. It was an S-class warrior from the number 1 guild, Taehan, Lee Haseon. Lee Haseon swung his huge sword and announced that he considered it important to test individual skills before starting the operation against Hanel. He suggested starting with a warm-up. Wielding his giant sword, the man strode forward. Heiji exclaimed excitedly that now it was her turn to take revenge for that past battle. Ju-yeon still looked at Lee Haseon in shock. He was amazed at how rude he was to the commanders, but at the same time, no one said a word. Soon after, with tears in his eyes and unable to contain himself, the boy exclaimed that he was simply amazing. And so, everyone entered the monster field. They were greeted by red-crested lizards, thirsty for chaos and destruction. A group of lizards rushed straight at Lee Haseon. The man was completely surrounded, but he maintained a majestic posture as if he was in complete control of the situation. Standing next to the other warriors, Ju-yeon watched the scene spellbound. He thought that no matter how much he thought about it, it was still unbelievable. A chill ran down his spine. He shook his head, ordering himself to wake up. He reasoned that wielding a sword with such characteristics was suicide. He was well aware of his position. He reminded himself that with his low base stats, he only survived thanks to his elemental ring. He decided that the path of magic was clearly the best option for him, and yet he couldn't take his eyes off the close combat. He wondered why this was happening. He thought that he should have no experience with swords, but strangely enough, it all seemed so familiar. Shortly after that, he healed the wounded warrior's arm with his thick golden light, suppressing his desires. He told himself that he should leave this impulse alone until he found a way to improve his physical abilities. Then he looked at Kim Hee-ji. who was fighting fiercely. He thought that close combat was too dangerous, and he concluded that, as expected, long-range magic was ideal. But at that moment, something sharp cut through the air. Lee Hae-sun cut through the red-crested lizards, as if they were insignificant creatures unworthy of his attention, and continued to advance on a huge group of enemies. Not a single monster claw scratched his armor. Ju-yeon, overcome by an inexplicable feeling from his past life, thought that with his skills, hiding them would be a waste of time, wouldn't it? The battle was chaotic. Then a status window appeared. It was a skill called Slaughter Madness. When the user is covered with the remains of defeated monsters, he temporarily absorbs the characteristics of his enemies. Lee Hae-sun seemed insatiable. He plunged his colossal sword into the head of one of the fallen lizards, still remaining vigilant. Our protagonist, in a complete trance, whispered to himself that he finally understood. It was a crazy skill that instantly increased physical attributes. Shortly thereafter, the grim-faced warrior tossed aside the monster's corpses as if they were nothing. But the lull quickly ended. A leaf fell on the water's surface. A new enemy appeared, a giant lizard in armor with a long, sharp sword, clearly the leader of the others. This monster was the boss of the Grand Park Seoul Swamp Field. The beast roared loudly, announcing its presence. There was no doubt about it. It was the fearsome king of poisonous lizards. One of the warriors shouted that it was the boss. Everyone took up their battle positions. With a greedy gleam in his eyes and a destructive aura, Lee Hae-sun activated another skill called Broken Limit. For 60 seconds, the user's attack power increases by 1 level. His body glowed with a red aura. Swinging his sword, he rushed at the leader of the beasts. The boss ran towards him coldly and fiercely. But before it could attack, Lee Hae-sun cut it in half with one quick and silent blow, while the monster's arms were still raised. The boss's skill, Jade Beauty, was registered in the list. Brother Kim Hee-ju, looking at his clean and flawless armor, muttered that this was how they had finished him off. The girl replied with disappointment. She claimed that she had almost defeated him single-handedly. Her brother asked mockingly if she really had almost finished him off by herself. An enraged Kim Hee-ji hit the warrior on the arm. The protagonist asked the mage if they would receive rewards even if they did not participate in the hunt. She explained that usually they would not. But if you contributed to the attack in some way, it counts. She noted that Ju-yeon had been removing debuffs the whole time, so that counted as a contribution. Surprised, he thought that he had previously wondered how healers leveled up, but now he realized that it was the easiest job in the world. When the battle was over, Lee Hae-sun sighed and put his sword, covered in monster fluids, back in its sheath behind his back. He announced that he would hold a final meeting and organize everything before distribution. The warrior's words did not linger in the mind of the protagonist, who was still analyzing his skills. For example, Crimson Madness. Using this skill, the user enters a berserk state when intoxicated by the fluids of defeated monsters, absorbing some of their characteristics. The protagonist couldn't contain his excitement. He thought that Lee Hae-sun was doing better than he had imagined, even handing out S-rank skills. Then Lee Hae-sun called over the healers, preparing to analyze their participation in the battle. When the warrior encountered the group's healer, the protagonist stared at him with such passion in his eyes, but with such a frightening expression that he ended up scaring the warrior. Surprised, Lee Hae-sun thought to himself that something was wrong with this guy, but internally, the protagonist was already rejoicing. He told himself that he had everything he needed. He added that now he just wanted to go home. A few days after the raid on Canal D, the protagonist had just finished taking a bath and was lying on his bed, muttering that he was exhausted. He opened the status window, wondering when he would be able to put it all together. Then he realized that he had finally accumulated a total of 4,000 SP. Seeing the amount, he smiled slightly and thought that it would be enough before he smashed Hanel's head in. It reminded him of the hard times when he rushed around completing daily missions for a measly 500 SP. The boy sighed. Why did E-rank missions come up so often? He complained that he couldn't even rest. Nevertheless, he admitted that getting several E-missions in a row was actually very lucky. He jumped up in excitement. He decided that since the heavens were helping him, it was time to upgrade his exemplary skill. Without hesitation, he upgraded the skill. Copying rose from level 2 to level 3. Now, at midnight, the number of copies is restored 3 times. Thinking, the boy reasoned. The original plan was to strengthen the attack with radiant power and resistance to change, and then blow everything up with explosive damage. But since Santa in the red cloak gave him madness of slaughter, 3 slots for copies were no longer enough. He decided that if he added offensive skills to the madness of slaughter, radiant power, and resistance to change, the synergy would be insane. The young man sighed again, thinking how great it would be if he could copy 4 skills. But he quickly dismissed the thought and declared that in any case he could now use 3. There was room for 1 more skill, and at that moment he was in the process of copying it. Resistance to change, an A-rank skill. When everything was ready, he headed to the monster field to test the new combination. There, he encountered a colossal beast. It looked like a brown werewolf with a giant axe. As always, Ju-yeon was wearing his brown cloak and showed no sign of fear. A maniacal smile froze on his face as he summoned an enhanced fireball. Later, the internet went crazy. Someone asked if anyone remembered Fire Psycho. They replied that this time he had appeared in Kafeon. A friend of one of the commenters was there and confirmed that it was complete chaos. The video of the destruction of Snake Mountain has already garnered over 4 million views. The warriors on the field shouted in despair, asking if this was the boss of the field. Someone admitted that they weren't ready for this. Another noticed that the boss seemed to be focused on someone else. The giant purple snake chased the warrior in a brown cloak through the thick forest. Just as the creature was about to strike him with its fangs, the boy launched a colossal fireball at it. A few seconds later, the snake's body began to burst into flames. There were screams in the background. People were wondering what kind of fireball it was. When they saw the protagonist running, they all began to suspect that it was him. Ju-yeon advanced with red eyes full of thirst for chaos. The group panicked when they noticed that he was heading straight for them. But the boy just ran past, ignoring the cameras and stunned looks. All they could think about was how agile this magician was to run like that. None of them noticed that the snake was still alive, and now they were its new target. But before the monster could attack, boom, another fireball exploded. Everyone looked back in silence. The fire-breathing madman had just saved them. Seconds later, the huge purple snake resumed its pursuit of the protagonist, who was running desperately, screaming. During his escape, he launched countless flaming balls at the creature, which writhed in agony. The fire-breathing psychopath shouted that enough was enough and demanded that the creature finally die. The warriors around him watched the guys fight in amazement. One of them, still not believing his eyes, commented that some crazy guy was defeating the field boss with only gradual damage. Elsewhere, a luxury car stopped, and a woman opened the door, announcing that the field inspection was complete. She announced that there was 1 hour and 24 minutes of free time left until the next meeting. The person who had just arrived was Muhammad Al, the #1 warrior in the rankings. He watched the video of the fiery psychopath while excited voices in the background shouted that the psychopath had defeated the mountain snake. A smile appeared on Muhammad Al's face as he watched the footage. The secretary asked him if he was bothered by this fiery psychopath, and he casually replied that of course he was, because this guy had taken his precious ring. The woman looked at him closely and noticed that he seemed completely sure that this man was Yoo Ju-yeon. Putting down the phone, the warrior noted that this was curious. He recalled that it hadn't been long since he had given him that elemental ring. Recalling the fight, he pointed out that this item did not affect agility and endurance. And yet, he dodged all attacks with small movements, like a man who already had extensive combat experience. Then he changed the subject and asked the secretary about the movements of the Raider Guild. She immediately replied that, as expected, they had been spotted near the special fields. Finally, he gave the order to keep an eye on both the psychopath and the raiders. He reasoned that with such attention on him, these pests would most likely start to gather. With that, Muhammad Al headed for his huge mansion, leaving his secretary behind. As he walked, he thought that he hoped they would not cause problems for his friend. In a distant office, a man in a white suit sat at a computer and watched the same video of the battle with the purple snake with complete delight. A sinister, tight smile appeared on his face as he whispered a name: the fiery psychopath. Currently, Ju-yeon was attracting a lot of attention. Later that night, in the hunting grounds, Ju-yeon was also watching a video of his own fight. Disappointed, he vented his emotions, calling those guys crazy. He was indignant that he had done all the work, so why were they earning the money? He lamented that his image rights had been turned into a joke, although he noted that his face was not even visible. But soon an idea came to him. He thought that if that was the case, why not post the video himself? He decided to verify his channel this time and upload the body camera footage there. Ambitious thoughts began to overwhelm his mind. He came up with a headline: Level 10 Novice Mage single-handedly defeats E-rank field boss Mountain Snake. He figured that if he also posted a video of the attack on Canal, the views would just explode. He imagined himself lying on a mountain of money and laughing non-stop. He asked himself if he should post video evidence, but he interrupted himself with the thought of how he was going to gather materials in such darkness. Then he opened the daily mission panel. There were only B-rank gathering missions. With a sigh of defeat, he lamented that he thought there would only be daily missions of rank E or F. If he had seen this mission earlier, he wouldn't have come at night. He complained that he had wasted the whole day just because he had defeated some ridiculous snake. He expressed his desire to finish everything before his skills reset at midnight. Suddenly, he noticed a blue sphere shining on the ground. When he picked it up, a message appeared. The essence of a special field has been collected. 1 of 10. Surprised, he exclaimed that it turns out it doesn't drop from monsters. This meant that he would have to search every corner of this huge field, running around in circles like an idiot. Disappointed, the young man complained about the mission. He admitted that if it weren't for the B rank, he would have given up long ago. At that moment, Ju-yeon didn't notice the flying beast sneaking up behind him. He was attacked by a huge stone griffin. With a surprised look on his face, he noticed the monster approaching, and dodged it with extreme ease, moving his body just a few centimeters. The beast lunged at him with all its might, but missed and crashed into the ground, falling down. The boy stood motionless, staring at the creature without any reaction. Only then did he realize what he had done. He was frightened, wondering what it was. And then, saying that he had almost died of fear, he asked himself how he had managed to dodge it. He assumed that his body moved on its own before he had time to think, and wondered if it was the effect of shining power combined with resistance to change. However, he decided to think about it later. Seeing that the griffin was trying to get up, the boy raised only his index finger and decided to finish the job quickly, launching his classic attack, a fireball. The explosion of flames was noticed by a group of warriors hunting nearby. One of them noticed that even at this hour, there were quite a few people hunting. Then he asked his companions, who wore black masks with red details, sheathing their swords on Canal. One of the men replied that the reconnaissance group had found him in the northwest. Stepping over the pile of bodies, the man said that the mere thought of catching Canal first and seeing that bastard Lee Hae-sung return empty-handed was enough to thrill him. One of the men asked him what would happen if other users intervened in the attack. He was followed by a whole battalion of masked warriors. With a psychopathic smile on his face, he put on his mask and coldly replied that there was only one thing left for them to do. He ordered them to simply kill them all. Meanwhile, our protagonist celebrated the completion of one of his missions. He shouted joyfully that he had finally finished exterminating these creatures. Then he picked up a glowing blue sphere, announcing that it was good that these essences were easier to find than he thought. He expressed hope that he would be able to find them all before midnight. By that point, he had collected 9 of the 10 special field essences. The boy smiled excitedly. He noted that now there was only one left to obtain, and the job would be done. At that moment, something flew past behind him. He turned around, stunned, trying to understand what was happening, and saw Hanel raising his hands, preparing to strike, while under fire from numerous simultaneous attacks. Scratching the back of his head, Ju-yeon muttered that wasn't their guild's attack supposed to take place tomorrow at dawn? And he cursed, realizing that they were in trouble. Several archers on the ground were aiming at Hanel. It was a frenzied hunt, and the leader of the attack shouted, ordering them to focus on the wings right now. Concerned, the boy asked himself what he should do now. He realized that the boss would be defeated by another group. Looking at the situation, he decided it was too late to try to contact the others. Then he remembered the mission to defeat Hanel. He thought that if you think about it, the main and side missions only say that you need to conquer this place, but they don't say who exactly and what contribution should be made. Ju-yeon asked himself if he really only had to deliver the final blow. Then, feeling inspired, he made a decision. He decided that was it, and he would just watch. The battle between the warriors and Hanel was intense, until the great boss began to fall, hurtling rapidly toward the ground. The warriors shouted joyfully that Hanel had fallen and now it was their chance. They ran towards the boss, surrounding him on all sides. Hanel's eyes were red with rage, but he seemed too weak to resist. Meanwhile, hiding behind a bush at a decent distance, the protagonist watched the nighttime crusade, cheering as if it were a show. At this point, Hanel's health had fallen below 50%. He couldn't fly. One of his wings was completely destroyed. The boss rose majestically. His body was enveloped in a golden magic circle that shone everywhere. It was the third phase. With two swords in his hands, the boss prepared himself. The melee battle began, and with just one swing of his blades, several warriors were brutally thrown aside. Ju-yeon continued to sit in the rear, watching the battle from the best seats. He marveled at the amount of dust that rose. Suddenly, he saw a blue sphere right in front of him. He jumped up, thrilled at the opportunity to grab it. He thought this mission would bring him easy money. Meanwhile, Hanel's three eyes began to emit an intense red light. He plunged his swords into the ground, causing an earthquake that tore apart the field right in front of the human warriors. Everyone was thrown back for miles, and some fell very close to where Ju-yeon was hiding. One of the fallen men was wearing a brown cloak identical to the protagonist's and was flying straight towards him. Holding the blue sphere, the protagonist wondered why he was heading there. Everyone fell to the ground with a crash. Two of the three men began to struggle to their feet, complaining of pain. They decided to check if anyone else was still alive. Meanwhile, ignoring the others, the boy in the brown cloak, exactly like Ju-yeon's, lay on the ground in a stupor. A mask fell next to him, which caught the attention of one of the warriors, who began to question who he was. Watching the boy get up, the man grumbled that this idiot had completely lost his mind. He asked if the man didn't know that magicians couldn't just leave like that. Ju-yeon stood up and scratched the back of his head in confusion. The other man shouted irritably, asking what he was doing. He told him to hurry up and not stand there like a statue. Having no other choice, the protagonist muttered that since it had come to this, everything was fine as long as he wasn't exposed, right? He looked back and thanked the stranger for the mask, even though he didn't know who he was. In the background, a real member of the group, also in a brown cloak, lay unconscious with foam at his mouth. Meanwhile, the battle against Hanel intensified. The warrior, the leader of the masked group, moved towards him, and they began to exchange fierce sword blows. Suddenly, countless blue fireballs flew at Hanel from afar. The flames hit the boss squarely, causing the other warriors to retreat in confusion. In shock, they began to ask each other where these fireballs were coming from. They hadn't been there before. In the background, the main character held a giant blue fireball on the tip of his index finger. He watched the battle with regret, thinking about someone going through the chaos on the front lines. He reflected that simply standing in the back, dealing damage and stealing experience, made him feel like trash. The boy realized the effect of the buff and thought that his firepower had become much stronger. Nevertheless, Ju-yeon followed the men's orders and acted as expected of him. However, the boy thought that if he didn't use his abilities, they would start to suspect something. But if he used them, he would stand out. He thought that if they weren't in the middle of a battle, they would have already discovered him. Meanwhile, Hanel was being bombarded with a barrage of blue fireballs. In the background, the main character struggled to contain his excitement, which attracted the attention of some masked warriors. But the main character didn't care. Now the boy could only think that, honestly, continuing to punch this punching bag with such characteristics was fun. He decided that since he had come this far, he would just blend in with the crowd and reap all the rewards. A window appeared. If Hanel lost at least 10% of his health during the battle, the Heavenly Island call order would be activated. When the summoning took place, the subjugation bonus was applied to the monsters of Heavenly Island. After a few seconds, an intense golden aura spread around Hanel. But soon the monster's attention began to wander. The stone griffins began to stare at the group of warriors who had just entered the battlefield. Some rhinos did the same. At the top of the hill, the new group of warriors was confused. They didn't understand what it all meant. They wondered if it was a raid. But the announced time was not now. The masked men did not like the intrusion. One of them pointed to the leader and warned that the people around them seemed to be noticing something was wrong. One of the newcomers tried to confront the group. He asked what they were doing there, but he was brutally cut in half by one of the masked men. The leader angrily declared that if Lee Hee-sung found out, it would be a headache, and ordered the uninvited guests to be eliminated as well. With these words, all the masked warriors rushed to destroy the other players. The newbies couldn't understand what was happening and why the players were attacking them. In the background, the main character watched all this with disbelief. He thought that in addition to stealing, they were also killing players. He did not expect them to be such a crazy gang and decided that he needed to get out of there quickly. One warrior was on the verge of a brutal death at the hands of one of the masked men. Falling to the ground, the man saw the sword coming down heavily on him. At the last second, he was saved by Lee Hee-sung, who had just entered the battlefield accompanied by several other warriors, including the brothers who were in the group with the main character. From a distance, the main character stared at Lee Hee-sung, visibly shaken, and seeing his face, thought he was completely screwed. The leader of the masked group stood firm against Lee Hee-seon, mocking him and saying that this disorganized bunch could not be the main raid group. Lee Hee-seon, the sword hero, kept a stern and thoughtful expression on his face. Clutching the hilt of his sword, he moved towards the masked leader, asking what kind of parasites they were, intruding on the raid and behaving in such a manner. Raising his sword with pure hatred, he shouted. He accused them not only of stealing the boss, but also of killing innocent players. Gritting his teeth and flashing his eyes, he shouted again that they would have no excuse, even when they died here. Without hesitation, Lee Hee-seon began his attack on the group of masked men who had taken control of the raid and were destroying innocent people. In the chaos, one of the masked men rammed into the main character and shouted at him to get out of the way, calling him a bastard worm. The battle became intense, with both sides wanting to completely destroy each other. Our main character panicked, not knowing what to do or where to hide. But the real problem was the field boss, Hanel. He began his relentless attack, commanding his monstrous creatures against the players. Stone griffins and rhino monsters rushed to attack the people, following the orders of their leader. The warriors began to fight, shouting that if they missed the final blow to the boss, they would get nothing. Others shouted, urging them to eliminate the raid healers first. The creatures attacked indiscriminately, striking both heroes and masked warriors. The main hero, observing the chaos around him, said that it had turned into a complete disaster. Trying to find a way out of this mess, he thought that they needed to quickly take down Cinnamon to restore order. He decided there had to be a better way to deal with this. It was then that the boy stared intently at Lee Hee-seon. The sword hero's eyes were completely red with rage. He rushed with all his might into a new attack. And that movement made Ju-yeon realize something important. Meanwhile, in the background, the brother and sister continued to fight the monsters. Kim Hye-ji launched fire attacks with her staff, while her brother protected her from the beast with his shield. A masked warrior crept up behind them, ready to strike the young woman in the back with his sword. She would have been killed if it weren't for Ju-yeon, who launched a huge blue fireball at the enemy, saving her at the last moment. Confused, Hye-ji looked in the direction from which the blue fireball had come. She saw a young man in a brown cloak standing with his back to her. A giant blue flame danced on the boy's fingers. Her brother in armor, unaware of what had happened, asked if she was okay. But Kim Hye-ji continued to stare in amazement at the mysterious hooded mage. Then she explained to her brother in a whisper, still not believing that the hooded mage had attacked his own team to save her. The tank's face contorted in shock. He understood what had just happened, but he found it hard to believe. Meanwhile, the main character continued to dodge the hero's attacks. It was almost midnight. As he dodged, he urgently thought that he needed to hold out a little longer. He told himself he had to hold out until midnight. The warrior tried to hit him, but he barely dodged and grabbed his phone amid the chaos. Finally, it was exactly midnight. It was time to counterattack. With a determined look, he looked at Lee Hee-seon and activated his copy skill without hesitation. The boy successfully copied the Blood Madness skill. Without wasting any time, the main character pointed his index finger at a row of monsters and launched a giant blue fireball. The explosion swept past Lee Hee-seon like lightning, incinerating the monster he was fighting. Shortly after, a system window appeared in front of him, clearly notifying him. 20 eliminations achieved. The effect of bloodlust was increased by 2%. Lee Hee-seon looked confusedly at the man in the cloak and mask, not understanding his intentions. But the boy ignored the furious gaze and continued to mercilessly attack the creatures. In the midst of all this, he couldn't help but think that if the monsters continued to appear at the same rate, then this bloodlust skill, which increased attributes by 2% with each elimination, was much more broken than the resistance to change, which gave a fixed increase. Then Ju-yeon turned to the center of the field and shouted the boss's name. His eyes were just insanely red. He looked at the boss in full rage and shouted goodbye to him, unleashing an attack. In the next second, a huge amount of deadly energy burst onto the battlefield. Not a single monster remained standing. All were turned to ash by blue flames. The heroes now looked at Cinnamon, who was kneeling, full of doubt. They wondered if the battle was finally over. But the main character knew the truth. Something was wrong. Suddenly, Cinnamon raised his face, his red eyes flashing menacingly. He stood up and a spear appeared in his hand. The main character swallowed nervously and thought that the final phase was about to begin. With the spear in his hand, Kanel launched a devastating attack against all the players present. Instinctively, Kim Hye-ji hid behind her tank brother, who raised his shield to protect everyone from this terrifying attack. The pressure of the blow was unbearable. All the energy spread around, throwing and crippling the warriors. One of the blows hit Ju-yeon directly. In desperation, the boy thought that if they didn't hold out, it would be the end of them. At the last moment, Kim Hee-jae's brother jumped in front of Ju-yeon, blocking the attack with his body. The blow was so strong that the brown hood flew off the protagonist's head, and the mask on his face almost cracked from the pressure. Shocked, the main character looked at the tank that had appeared in front of him. He didn't expect this and wondered why it had protected him. The warrior just looked at him firmly and said with a determined look that he owed him. He added that he would collect the debt later. The ground around Cinnamon was completely destroyed after his devastating attack. The boss, intrigued, shifted his gaze to something. The tank brother managed to withstand the blow, but it was obvious that the pressure was too much for his body. Staggering, the man fell to his knees. Behind him, Ju-yeon was already preparing. He concentrated a massive attack, a fireball of blue flame the size of a football field. The tension in the air was so thick that the boy's mask shattered into pieces. A colossal burning sphere hovered above him, like a meteor ready to fall. Kanel was right in front of him. It was impossible to miss. Ju-yeon pointed his hand at him and shouted that it was his turn now. The fireball was launched with incredible force, flying past the kneeling tank and hurtling straight towards Kanel. The blow was instantaneous and brutal. Kanel was hit directly, without time to react. The entire area shook. The group of heroes became alert, while excited voices asked what had happened to the field boss, Kanel. The boss, now kneeling, tried to hold himself up with his spear, but soon collapsed completely. Numerous items began to fall around him. The group rushed to the fallen body. Lee Hae-seon reacted first, seeing Kanel and realizing that the field boss had been completely eliminated. The leader of the masked group also approached. Lee Hae-seon immediately looked at him suspiciously. The warrior raised his sword at the masked man and shouted angrily. He said that if he didn't want to be eliminated, he should get out of the way. With a furious expression on his face, the masked leader thought disappointedly, "This is starting to annoy me." Unable to restrain himself, he remarked, "No one here can deny that their mage is the MVP, right?" He continued in his thoughts that he needed to deal with this brat as soon as possible and collect the rewards for the final boss. Ju-yeon, now without his mask, scratched the back of his head as he looked at everyone. Soon, the main character's system announced that the main mission had been completed, and that in 10 seconds, he would be transported to the training area where he could choose his rewards. Ju-yeon froze in place, not knowing how to react. The masked leader looked thoughtfully at Ju-yeon. Wait a minute, he thought. He didn't know that one of their mages had such a high damage level. He thought he had never seen him before, but there was something strangely familiar about him. Suddenly, the main character ran towards the masked group and Lee Hae-seon. He passed through the warriors with incredible ease until he reached Kanel's body. Lee Hae-seon shouted furiously that this young man was a damn bastard. But the boy picked up an object resembling a necklace from the ground and announced, asking if everyone had seen clearly, that he had killed Cinnamon. At that moment, the masked leader recognized who this mage was and cursed silently. He thought about this brat, damn it, this must be a joke. He realized that this was the same fiery psychopath. Showing the necklace to everyone present, Ju-yeon loudly declared that it was his and thanked them for the raid. Then both the masked leader and Lee Hae-seon simultaneously attacked the boy with their swords in a rage. But their swords only cut through the air. Ju-yeon had disappeared. They didn't even feel the sword hit anything. Lee Hae-seon screamed, veins bulging on his face. He shouted that this bastard was trying to fool him. The masked leader just thought indignantly that he had been made a fool of. Soon he screamed, exploding with rage. Lee Hae-seon could only grit his teeth and think in rage. To be deceived because of the boss's item was unbelievable. A few seconds later, the main character appeared in an empty space resembling outer space. Looking around, he was in shock. Soon, several system windows appeared before him. The most important one stated that the main mission had been completed. The last one reported that the soul of the boss, Kanel, had been absorbed along with the skill. Surprised, Ju-yeon exclaimed, asking if that was all. Then a small creature, resembling an elven fairy, appeared, waved her hand and greeted him. She greeted him, calling him a brave warrior. The little fairy had colorful wings and looked at Ju-yeon with hungry eyes. Then she announced that she was Ego, his training assistant. She hovered in front of the boy, tiny in stature but full of presence. Confused, Ju-yeon asked what she meant by training assistant. Ego explained that since his main mission had been accomplished, she had been called upon to guide him during his training. This surprised the boy. He had never heard of such a thing before. Could this be an exclusive event for those with unique, high-level traits? Interrupting his thoughts, Ego asked if she should start collecting his rewards. The boy thanked her and nodded. She waved her hand, and a new window appeared. Reading the message about choosing a detailed improvement for trait number 1, Ju-yeon pondered the explanation. Trait improvements worked like second-class evolution. Confused, he muttered quietly to himself, "Second class." Ego replied, explaining that this was correct. She said he could choose one of his skills and improve its detailed traits. 2 windows opened in front of him, showing the skills he had already acquired. The first one showed skill mastery, and the second window showed skill copying. Then Ego asked what he would like to choose. The young man began to think. He thought that if he improved his income, he would increase the SP he received from attacks, which would be good in the long run. But right now, he was too weak. He reasoned that if this raid had taken place before midnight and the skills had not been reset, he would never have captured Cinnamon. Thus, he concluded that increasing the number of available skills was the best move at the moment. With that, he announced his choice. After reading the notification, his eyes widened. He thought, wait a minute, if he was lucky, maybe he could get up to 8 copies a day. Then Ego asked if he would like to check the other unclaimed rewards. Ju-yeon immediately looked at her and replied in the affirmative. So, Ego continued to reveal the details. This was a reward item for a daily mission. The reward was a C-rank sword, known as the Fire Explosion Sword. The main character thought about it, because after receiving the sword, it seemed that he would not be able to get rid of the fire attribute. Opening the small brown box, he realized that it was not a reward, but a bonus task, to defeat 2 bosses and kill another 100 monsters. The young man was extremely excited and exclaimed in disbelief. The amount of SP was absurd, and what an amazing deal it was. The next reward was the addition of a new sub-attribute to his unique attribute. It was the 4th sub-attribute. Blue was the best, rank D. Ju-yeon analyzed the options while Ego hovered beside him. Soon, he exclaimed that it wasn't bad. Then he picked up the necklace that had dropped from the boss and declared that this was actually what he was waiting for. So the boy studied the item's characteristics. It was Cinnamon's cursed necklace, an SS-Rank rare item. Simply equipping it increased all attributes by 5 points. After reading the item's characteristics, the boy began to cry with joy. He said that these characteristics were insane. Super excited, he turned to the notification that appeared behind him and wondered if the boss's item was that strong. How strong the boss's own skill must be. The newly acquired special skill was called Advent, rank A. At this critical moment, the fallen angel Cannel descended onto the battlefield. Ju-yeon remembered this boss and said to Cannel that he was simply a god. It was the final phase skill he had seen back then. Then he sighed, saying, "Phew, what a relief that I was able to kill him before he activated that skill." Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he concluded that in any case, it was an emergency skill with a 30-day cooldown, so he needed to be careful. After that, he was satisfied with the improvements and stated that, as expected, he would start with a sample to be on the safe side and the rest could wait. He then confidently stated that investing in efficiency yields the best results, and the little fairy Ego celebrated beside him, rejoicing in the boy's progress. Shortly after that, he improved another skill, Blessed, to level 2. With a confident smile and an exaggerated pose, Ju-yeon announced that he needed to develop attributes for greater reliability. Soon, a window appeared before his eyes, informing him that the daily mission had evolved to level 2. Feeling like a winner, he spoke aloud, saying that steady growth begins with daily missions. Next to him, Ego raised the boy's morale, shaking pom-poms like a cheerleader, and soon said that he was amazing. Exhausted, the young man collapsed on the floor, muttering that it was finally over. He asked if there was nothing left to do here, right? But Ego corrected him, saying no. She said that so far, he had only been receiving rewards, and that from this moment on, the real training begins. This made Ju-yeon anxious. Ego seriously asked if he remembered the last sentence of the main mission, "Brave warrior." The boy tried to remember, asking, "Wait, what was the last sentence of the main mission?" Then he remembered, "Try to conquer a special field for the survival of Earth and humanity." He repeated it aloud, confused, asking, "Wait, what does that mean?" the survival of Earth and humanity. And then the little fairy revealed the truth in a gloomy tone. Yes, his world was about to be destroyed by invaders from another dimension. The scene changed abruptly. Returning to the city, the reporter told everyone that Cinnamon's Sky Island had disappeared naturally after defeating the boss. The citizens of this region saw clear skies again. The portal connecting to Heavenly Island had disappeared, but now a phenomenon of spatial distortion was occurring, and they cannot rule out the possibility that the field will mutate again. The army guarded the territory. No one could enter without permission. Lee Hee-seon, the leader of the group that defeated Cornelia, gave an interview to reporters. He stated that, although it may have already been leaked through video, they encountered difficulties due to a group that maliciously stole the boss. Despite this, the raid on Cornelia was successfully completed. Immediately after the raid, these unidentified individuals disappeared. A curious reporter asked what the reward was for the special field boss. Lee Hee-seon firmly replied that he had first confirmed the increase in all characteristics. Another reporter insisted, asking if any boss items had dropped. This clearly angered Hee-sung, who turned away, and as he left, he announced that that was all. At that moment, someone watching the interview turned off the TV. Kim Hae-ji was at home, sitting on the sofa, having watched the entire interview. She sighed. Something was bothering her. Meanwhile, during strength training, the young woman's brother said seriously that if Lee Hee-sun got to that guy, he could well be eliminated. The girl persistently tried to call the main character, but only heard an automated message saying that the call could not be completed and would soon be switched to voicemail. Concerned, her brother commented, asking if she was still calling him. And what if her predictions were wrong? She replied without much interest that, who knows? She suggested that the cloak was standard equipment for a mage. But if his main attack was a fireball, that was a different story. A fire-throwing psychopath. Suddenly, Kim Hae-ji received a call from Ju-yeon. She was extremely excited and answered, putting the call on speakerphone. Without beating around the bush, she greeted Ju-yeon and said she would get straight to the point. She asked if he was the mage who helped in the raid against Cannel. Ju-yeon tried to dodge her questions. He even claimed that he hadn't actually participated in the raid, but Hae-ji insisted. She noticed that the magical equipment he was using was similar to the equipment used by the mage in that raid. She tried to contact him, but he disappeared before she could talk to him. Ju-yeon continued to deny it. He said he wasn't even at the raid site. However, Kim Hae-ji was sure it was Ju-yeon that day. He couldn't convince her otherwise. Trying to get out of the situation, Ju-yeon firmly said that it wasn't him anyway. He added that he felt bad for being invited and not participating, and apologized for that. Then he ended the call. He said he couldn't talk right now because he was taking a bath, so he was hanging up. The brother and sister stared at the phone with the same thought. In the bath, Ju-yeon hung up angrily and muttered that she probably wouldn't call again. Kim Hae-ji was very persistent and called every minute, which drove Ju-yeon crazy. Recalling what had happened, the young man thought that he was already beginning to be annoyed by these strange conversations that were popping up everywhere. The main character remembered what the fairy Ego had said. She told him to remember that his world was about to be destroyed by invaders from another dimension, but not to worry, because he had a special power, the Master of Skills. This power was the ability to change reality, a gift given only to heavenly beings. It was a divine gift created for him. Confused, Ju-yeon asked why he had such power. He asked if he was some kind of deity or something like that. He added that he had served in the army properly, so it didn't make sense. Ego replied casually that it was complicated, but he shouldn't think too much about it. She reminded him how bravely Ju-yeon had fought in another world and explained that he had already done a lot and received rewards for it. Now there was only one last choice left. Ju-yeon broke out in a cold sweat. He wondered what that choice could be. Ego continued that the power he possessed was not yet the true power of the divine fragments. A hero is someone who bears the burden of saving the world. And this power could remain dormant or blossom, depending on his choice. She asked if he would agree to survive and bear the weight of this power, or would he choose to save the world and bear the burden bestowed upon him. She tried to reassure him. She told him not to worry, that saving the world is not necessarily the hero's duty. It was just one of many options he could choose, as always. Returning to the present, still in the bathtub, he sighed, thinking, honestly, for someone like me, who until recently was just a lazy guy, talk of salvation. He decided, okay, after the bath, he would eat chicken and drink beer. At Kim Hee-jae's house, something on her tablet caught her attention. She analyzed and listed Ju-yeon's skills, And according to her keen intuition and brilliant analysis, the guy was definitely a psychopath. She still hadn't found any solid evidence, so... While Kim Hee-ji was thinking intently, her brother approached her. Ignoring his presence, she continued to mutter that no matter how much she thought about it, she needed to meet him face to face. Soon her brother asked why she was so obsessed with this guy. The girl admitted that even those with an S rank were in field zones where death could come at any moment. If she was going to be eliminated anyway, she wanted to be the best in the field. To do that, she needed someone exceptional, like a psychopath, on her team. Her brother gave up trying to understand his sister's thoughts and sighed. He touched her shoulder and said that if she wanted to be the best, she shouldn't always act impulsively. She replied confidently that with all the information she had gathered, she could still make some assumptions about Ju-yeon. Then she began to review her detailed analysis aloud, explaining it step by step, and it turned out to be very complex. Her brother just sighed and asked if she was stupid. He said that things couldn't happen so perfectly. But the scene changed. Following the girl's intuition, the brother and sister went hunting. What the tank brother witnessed next was amazing. Kim Hee-ji's sister stood face to face with the main character. She was right about where the boy would go on his next hunt. Ju-yeon tried to explain, stammering in front of the determined girl, that it wasn't what she thought. He said that he didn't actually hunt, but sold. Deep down, Brother Tank just thought he was serious. Kim Hee-ji smiled, trying to calm him down. She demanded that he stop pretending, saying that she already knew everything and asked him to just tell the truth. And yet Ju-yeon couldn't reveal his true identity. He insisted on lying, even though the girl clearly didn't believe him. He asked what she was talking about. He added that he was just an ordinary healer, that's all. For his brother, the situation turned into complete chaos. He just thought about how some girl was manipulating the hunter. Soon Tank interrupted the discussion and decided to voice his proposal loudly. He said he would give him 500 an hour and suggested they leave. Then he tried to console the defeated-looking protagonist. He pointed out that he would be wasting his time trying to change Kim Hee-jae's mind. Dragging Ju-yeon away, he reminded him that they had agreed on the repayment of his debt. The young man tried to argue, but couldn't. What Tank said was true. In the end, Ju-yeon simply accepted that he had lost. He agreed, saying, "Okay, fine," and suggested they leave. An excited Kim Hee-ji exclaimed, "Okay," and suggested they go straight to the battlefield. But Ju-yeon hesitated and asked her to wait, but she interrupted him. She asked what was wrong now. Embarrassed, he finally admitted that he just needed to use the restroom. The brother and sister froze, speechless. Then Tank remembered the notes his sister had made, especially one. Ju-yeon suffered from irritable bowel syndrome. In disbelief, he wondered if she had really confirmed even that. Meanwhile, the protagonist was crying in the shower. He thought that this time they had definitely labeled him an asshole. So, the group went hunting in the cave. Kim Hee-ji didn't leave the protagonist alone for a second. She bombarded him with questions. She asked him seriously to just tell her already. About the mage who disappeared after helping with the raid on Canal, and about that psychopath. She asked if it was him or not Ju-yeon. Even when the girl hung on his arm, Ju-yeon made a weak excuse, pretending he couldn't hear her well. But Hee-ji was persistent, very persistent, which began to bother the guy. The area they were in was known as the Class D hunting ground Spider's Nest. She said she wanted to repay him for his help and swore she would keep it a secret. Ju-yeon wiped his face with sweat, thinking about what she had said. Almost certainly, that cheat mage was the same fiery psychopath. The guy remembered the moment when her brother demanded repayment of the debt. A deal is a deal. Ju-yeon could no longer deny it. Everything was now more than obvious. He simply had no way out. Meanwhile, a huge red spider moved above the warriors' heads, but no one noticed, and the conversation continued. Finally, Ju-yeon gave in. He asked her not to tell anyone else about it. The girl's eyes widened in surprise. She noted that it was no surprise that he seemed to have more mana than she did. Even after the revelation, she still wanted to know more. But the protagonist remained skeptical and explained that it was all about equipment bonuses. Excited, Hedge asked if he was a mage, what skill books he used for buffs or healing. While they were talking, the brother who was leading the group began to sense something strange in the cave. Tired of the chatter, he turned to the two of them. He reminded them that this was a high-level D-class field full of monsters. He asked if they were tired of fooling around. Behind him stretched a vast expanse of cobwebs. Hedge finally fell silent, and Ju-yeon rejoiced inwardly. Eager to try out his new weapon, Ju-yeon pulled out his new fiery red sword and announced that since he was being paid, he would take care of business and clear the way. The sword exuded a dense red aura. It was a flaming sword with a magic power of +3. Haeji, surprised, realized that he was also a user of a magic sword. Ji explained that he simply couldn't afford to buy a staff. With a serious look on his face, Ju-yeon raised his sword. He said that since it had come to this, let's test his skills and see what this thing was capable of. Haeji watched with excitement but also confusion as the red sword turned bluish. She noticed that ice had appeared instead of fire. Meanwhile, Ju-yeon thought that one of the advantages of a skill master was the ability to use all kinds of skills. Then he stretched out his hand and used his ice spear skill. Then the guy thought excitedly as he looked at his new attack. Now he could also combine several skills. Then he added a new feature to his technique, the poison feature. This technique poisons the target but requires a conductive medium to use. The poisoned ice spear was launched straight into the giant web in front of him, hitting dozens of spiders, but there were still hundreds more deep inside. The hail of poisonous ice continued without stopping. The spiders still crawled forward. Ju-yeon's eyes glowed with an intense green light. He clenched his fist and announced, "Catalyst. This skill enhances the effects of poison on enemies. If the target is under the effect of more than 3 layers of poison, the effect turns into critical poisoning, dealing even more damage." Sheathing his sword, he thought it was a good idea to improve his attack with the boss skill Catalyst. Countless poisonous spiders lay lifelessly scattered on the ground before them. Analyzing the attack's power, Ju-yeon thought that ice magic wasn't bad either. But if he was caught off guard, he would be finished. He decided it would be better to avoid using fireballs for a while. Kim Hee-ji was stunned. In shock, she shouted that he was not a fire mage. The guy admitted that yes, but the damage from the fireball seemed weak to him compared to other spells. The girl, not understanding him, wondered who or what Ju-yeon really was. After the big hunt, everyone went to celebrate with a barbecue. The place was crowded, and the smell of delicious food filled the air. Kim Hee-ji was ecstatic, holding a large mug of happiness with a smile from ear to ear when she exclaimed, 27! But then she pulled herself together, saying to wait because he was a friend. So let's talk. Everyone enthusiastically raised a toast. Eating and drinking with his companions, the protagonist seemed stunned, muttering that he was going to run away when the hunt was over. Ju-yeon recalled the attack in the cave when he struck the Spider Queen with a huge poisoned ice stake. At that moment, the system notified him of the absorption of the soul of a D-rank field boss, the Spider Queen. Satisfied, he thought it was good that he had defeated the boss with one blow. He was about to head home when something caught his attention. In the background, the brother and sister were reading the red notification, clearly confused. Due to insufficient contribution, they failed to obtain the soul of the D-rank field boss, the Spider Queen. They stared at the protagonist in disbelief. In the end, she suggested buying everyone a drink. The guy panicked, avoiding her gaze, and tried to change the subject. In the present, Kim Hee-ji was staring intently at Ju-yeon, and all he could think about was that it would be better to relax and have another drink. Putting her empty mug on the table, Kim Hee-ji began to frantically call Ju-yeon's name. She pointed at him and announced that she had an offer he couldn't refuse. With her face completely red, clearly drunk, Kim Hee-ji staggered, speaking loudly. The protagonist watched the scene and thought they were friends. Then he became her older brother, and now everything had turned into some kind of mess. Ju-yeon remembered the raid he had conducted with the masked players, while the girl babbled that monsters in the field weren't the only danger. She said that PvP with other players often happened, like what had happened in Canal. Kim Hee-ji continued, saying that of course some people say that once you become strong enough, everything will work out. But when they hunt field bosses, they don't hunt alone. They hunt as a team. She poured more drink into the protagonist's mug as she continued talking. She said that even if they were monsters, the situation would be the same. She spilled the drink on the table, making the protagonist visibly nervous. After emptying the entire bottle, she exclaimed that he couldn't be fooling around. She stated that hunting alone was too dangerous, and she asked how he would cope with a high-level field without a tank or a schedule. In addition, he would still have to deal with taxes from selling items. Meanwhile, Hee-ji rummaged through her bag, pulled out a stack of papers, and excitedly handed them to the protagonist, saying that she would take care of it for him. He should just focus on hunting. The shocked protagonist asked if she was really trying to sign a contract with him. She confirmed this, noting that there weren't many reliable users in this field. She recalled the last raid against Haina and added that he was strong and that they shared a secret. Excited, Kim Hee-ji announced that monsters drop items when they are killed, and people leave their names. She said that if he couldn't reach the top alone, he should do it with help. She added that she hated being a background character more than dying there. Her brother just drank kvass. Almost shoving the contract in the guy's face, she laid her cards on the table. If he signed, he would get an exclusive apartment for hunters, where the most beautiful woman in the world would live next door. Her brother realized that Kim Hee-ji was trying her best to recruit him. Suspiciously, the protagonist said that he thought he knew the answer, but he asked who this most beautiful woman in the world would be. Convinced she was right, Hye-ji replied that of course it was her. The group fell silent, waiting for Ju-young's answer. Finally, he said that the conditions were too good, and that he couldn't refuse. Before he could change his mind, Haji shouted that they should sign the contract quickly. The girl was beaming. Her brother, embarrassed, scolded her. He told her to sit down and eat, saying she was embarrassing herself. In the end, Ju-young signed the contract. Hye-ji then explained that the field schedule would give priority to requests from Group A. She promised to take care of everything outside of hunting, including his routine. She handed him a card and told him to buy whatever he needed with it. She said she would manage all the money from his hunting. She added that if he had any questions, he should just call her. The guy took the card, still confused, looking around as if in a dream. The protagonist was already in his new apartment overlooking the entire city and, enchanted, looked around. Soon he exclaimed that the explanation was perfectly clear. And then he exploded with happiness, imagining his prosperous future. He said it was amazing, the contract was wonderful, that hunting alone was chaos. And best of all, although he had avoided her because of the previous situation, to be honest, Hedge was beautiful, and she had offered to be his manager. Shortly after that, he thought to himself that he no longer envied Muhammad Ali. Since he acquired this skill, everything has been going well. Right after that, he saw several notifications pop up in front of him. It was midnight, and he received a reward. His skills were increased. Inspired by the result, he enthusiastically shouted that it was a successful high-level gacha, and that now he didn't even need to look at Lee Hyson's face anymore. He decided that it was finally time to test the ice spear. At that moment, he remembered what Hedge had said when she handed him the contract. She said that he was strong after all, and he thought to himself that if he used Fireball together with Bloodfight X, the power of his attack would be insane. It was then that the guy called out to Kim Hye-ji. She turned around in surprise. She was about to leave him alone. Then Ju-young exclaimed decisively that she should get ready to go out on the field. He declared that today he would carry her. On the phone screen, the video of the little girl with fireballs was paused. Anticipating what would happen next, Ju-young concluded that perhaps he had been too relaxed and carefree. While Hye-ji was getting ready, her brother watched her. Concerned, he asked if they were really going to the C-rank field, just the three of them. Hye-ji, who had reached level 36, was eager to go there because she wanted to see how they would fare at least once. Ju-young, who approached during the conversation, quickly reassured them. He said that in any case, the recommended level was between 31 and 40. He added that there would be no problems, bro. To tell the truth, it was the protagonist that the tank was most worried about. Brother Hedge frowned, as this level range was only a recommendation from the system. Depending on the group and its organization, the ideal level could vary significantly. Despite his fears, the protagonist was not worried. He said he had a plan and would take all their experience points for them. With the new skills he'd acquired, Ju-yeon knew there was nothing they couldn't do. After some time, the group arrived at a C-rank field, the Inak Natural Recreational Forest. It was a notorious field for plant-type monsters. Because they were adapted to the forest, there were many mutants there. For this reason, it was ideal for the group to advance with 2 area damage dealers. However, Ju-yeon wanted to try something different. As soon as he arrived at the recreational field, he launched a massive fireball that rained down on the wooden monster. Hye-ji was impressed by the attack, and Ju-yeon was pleased. It was the perfect attribute for fighting such monsters. Ju-yeon's plan was to copy only the energy combat enhancement to deal with the growing number of monsters, and as a precaution, he also saved the copied backup skill. Finally, he wanted to test whether he could copy his combat technique via his body camera. As 2 magic circles appeared next to Ju-yeon, flames erupted like a wave, drowning the monsters in flames. It was a flashy ability that he had prepared to serve as his finishing blow. While Ju-yeon was lost in thought about how many skills he could copy, he was watched by his teammates, who noticed his maniacal smile. Heji felt a little awkward. And seeing Ju-yeon laughing while destroying the monsters, she quickly ran up to her brother. Now they understood why people called Yoo-yeon a psychopath. The hunt continued as usual. Yoo-yeon created fireballs as hot as the sun to dispatch the monsters. While the group hunted, a man in a suit watched them from a distance, speaking through an earpiece. The image he saw was transmitted to a computer, and his voice was heard by someone viewing the footage. He reported that the target's location had been confirmed and their skills and appearance matched. The knife spun through the air, instantly striking the computer screen. Enraged, the knife's owner gave vent to his rage. He said that only a short time had passed, and he still dared to show himself. Then he wondered if, since he himself wanted to die, he should fulfill his wish. Unaware that someone was planning to hunt him, Ju-yeon continued to move through the forest, starting large fires whenever he encountered the wooden monster. After some time of hunting, the mutant trees turned into charcoal, and various precious stones and items were scattered across the ground. Excitedly collecting the stones, Ju-yeon checked and saw that his level had risen from 15 to 17. Something caught his eye among the ashes. It looked solid. He pulled it out thinking it was an object, but when he realized he was holding a skeleton, the smile on his face turned to shock. Heji and her brother heard a scream echoing in the distance and quickly turned around. Approaching Ju-yeon, they asked what had happened. Sitting on the ground, the protagonist trembled and stuttered. He said it was a body and that he'd let his guard down, thinking no one was there. He asked if he'd accidentally hit someone. Heji reassured him. She said no one could turn into a skeleton just because of the fire skill. After examining the remains on the ground, she came to a conclusion. She noted that no one would have come to the battlefield without armor or equipment. She added that it appeared he had been attacked by other people, and his belongings had been taken. Having completed her analysis, Heji sighed and commented that it would be best to report the discovery to the cleanup team. Heji's calm surprised the protagonist, but there was a reason for it. She'd seen this many times. In fact, it was commonplace in the hunting grounds. Since they couldn't determine whether it was the work of a cult, tracking down the culprit would be difficult. After hearing the entire explanation, the protagonist swallowed. Seeing how experienced the girl seemed, he asked if she had ever been attacked before. Heji confirmed that she had been attacked, and remembered that incident. A bald man with an axe suddenly rushed at her, even though he was part of her own team. Ju-yeon was increasingly surprised by her words. She explained that they were hunting and they tried to attack her from behind. She explained that it's easy to know who your enemies are when you face monsters because they are all enemies. But people are a different matter. You never know when they'll turn on you, to steal your items or your body. Yeji smiled and blushed slightly as she looked into Ju-yeon's eyes and finished. She asked, because frankly speaking, she is quite beautiful, isn't she? Ju-yeon couldn't believe that she could be so vain, even while discussing such things. Returning to a serious tone, she explained that this was why she was attacked not only for objects, and that this was the first time she had to defend herself and eliminate another person. Brother Heji, who had supported her then, remained silent as he listened to the story. Heji quickly recovered and smiled again. She said those bastards practically ran into her, begging for it, so the result wasn't entirely unexpected. After telling the whole story, she asked Ju-yeon to be careful, as the hunting fields were always full of crazy people. She said that when it gets dangerous, he can hide behind her older brother, okay? Although he couldn't reveal how high his strength stat was, the protagonist chuckled arrogantly. He stated that frankly, even if Kainal showed up right now, he didn't think he would have any problems. Heji couldn't help but laugh at his confidence. While the three were talking, a small sphere rolled to Ju-yeon's feet. The protagonist was surprised to see her, and as soon as he determined through the system that it was a pheromone bomb, it exploded. In an instant, a mist with an enchanting effect spread across the area, bewitching the group. At the same time, the wooden monsters began to walk towards them. A wave of monsters shook the earth, rolling in like a horde. The tank moved quickly, coming to a stop in front of Ju-yeon and Hyeji. However, before he could raise his shield to block the monsters, Ju-yeon rushed past him, charging at the horde. He declared that he could handle such numbers on his own. But it wasn't just the monsters. Hiding in a corner, a bandit with a crossbow took aim at Ju-yeon. Without warning, the arrow struck Ju-yeon. However, to the shooter's disappointment, the arrow that hit Ju-yeon's neck simply bounced off without causing any serious harm. When the arrow fell to the ground, Ju-yeon smiled. He'd already realized it was an ambush. With his stats, he couldn't care less if a simple arrow hit him. But as soon as he showed confidence, poison began to spread throughout his body. The paralysis effect kicked in, along with the slowing and pain effects, which were supposed to last for 3 minutes. In an instant, Joo-yeon fell to his knees, trembling. From a dark corner of the monster forest, the one leading the attack smiled. He announced that the time for the hunt had come. Seeing that Joo-yeon had been hit and was writhing in pain, Hyeji ran towards him. Trying to bring him to his senses, she was so desperate that she did not notice the approach of a huge mutant tree. At the very last moment, just before the impact, she noticed the presence of the monster. Hyeji unleashed her fury with a spear of fire. The searing magic tore through the trunk and wood, quickly reducing it to nothing more than a twisted shell. However, only one of the monsters was defeated. Behind him, the horde still stood. Hyeji gritted her teeth. The number of monsters in this area was unusual. They couldn't hold them off while protecting Joo-yeon, so a decision had to be made immediately. Brother Hyeji hoisted Joo-yeon onto his shoulder and raised his large shield with his other hand to clear the way. With a large tank at the head, the group advanced through the mutant trees. Hyeji supported him as best she could, using her fire spells without worrying about how much energy she was expending. But when they advanced a little further, another sphere rolled towards them. Brother Hyeji reacted quickly and raised his shield, but she was even faster. With a firestorm, she destroyed the grenade before it could explode. The man who had thrown her looked at them irritably. He asked where they were going. He asked, "Do they want to escape without a fight?" Several mercenaries stood behind him, ready to act on his command. Brother Hyeji frowned and asked the man's identity, but he did not answer. Instead, he pointed to Joo-yeon, who was being carried on his shoulder. He said he was the one who had business with their cargo, and he offered to leave him. In response to these words, Hyeji immediately threw a fire spear without even answering. But the man she was aiming at swung his sword deftly and broke the spell. Hyeji instantly recognized the technique he used to neutralize her attack and asked a question. She asked if he had been on the raid against Kanel. The man smiled, recognized. He remarked that she was pretty, but rather clueless. He added that it looked like he'd have to eliminate her too. With a dark gaze, a murderous aura rose around him, making his intentions clear. At his signal, one of his henchmen pulled out another pheromone bomb. As soon as the sphere hit the ground, it exploded, releasing an attractive toxin. This gas was precisely what attracted the mutant trees. And soon a new horde formed. Hyeji and her brother gritted their teeth as they saw danger approaching again. In an instant, the ferocious monsters were right in front of them, attacking at full speed. Holding Joo-yeon with one hand, the tank pushed one of the monsters away with his shield. Hyeji also went all out, using fire magic to deal with those who got too close. Meanwhile, Joo-yeon was groaning in pain. Although the others did their best, his body didn't move the way he wanted. His skin was burning. He didn't understand how things had gotten to this point, and will this be the end of him? Trying to comprehend what is happening, he woke up abruptly when a drop of red liquid fell on his face. The tank carrying him fell to its knees, and Hyeji, exhausted, was wounded in the shoulder. And yet, before them, the horde of monsters was defeated. Joo-yeon didn't understand how this happened or why. Then he remembered Hyeji's words when she told him that he could hide behind her brother if things became dangerous. She wasn't lying. When she saw him trembling, Hyeji knew Joo-yeon had regained consciousness. Surprised that he was trying to get up, she tried to stop him. She asked if he had come to his senses, and if he could really walk. Hyeji was confused when Joo-yeon took out his cell phone. The protagonist ignored her question and instead voiced a request. He wanted them to keep what was about to happen a top secret. The bandits grinned as they watched the group deal with the monsters. One of them said they were holding up well, even carrying this dead weight. And he promised that as a reward he would make it so that it wouldn't hurt. Hyeji gritted her teeth and cursed at the bandit. Seeing Joo-yeon rise, the man was also surprised. He wondered how much longer the mage would remain unconscious. He continued with a mocking grin. He noticed that, judging by his appearance, he had been beaten up, hadn't he? The protagonist, drenched in sweat from the pain, silently acknowledged everything he had endured. Seeing Joo-yeon's expression, the bandit laughed even louder. He asked if he couldn't wait to see what happened next. Ignoring the threat, Joo-yeon silently raised his hand to the sky. The bandit standing guard expected a fireball. He quickly created a shield around himself and his subordinates. In a deep voice, Joo-yeon asked only one question. He asked if they were sure they were ready. Immediately, countless magic circles appeared in the sky, one after another. Everyone looked up, stunned with disbelief. At that moment, everyone realized what it was, but that realization left them with no chance of salvation. Like the Dark Lord of the Stars, Joo-yeon conjured magic circles that shone like suns. They realized it was the mage who had obtained Muhammad Allah's ring. With a blank look, the protagonist unleashed his meteor shower ability. At his command, huge boulders engulfed in flames rained down from the magic circles. Before he could be hit, the bandit dispelled his shield and rushed towards Ju-yeon. He couldn't believe the mage was willing to sacrifice himself and his allies with his own attack. In a desperate lunge, he launched a mad blow at Ju-yeon. But before he could get any closer, Ju-yeon muttered the name of the skill Blood Rage. The moment the spell was activated, chaos erupted inside the bandit's body, causing him to freeze in place, unable to take another step. A meteor shower descended, a sight that no one present on this hunting ground had ever seen before. In an instant, it seemed as if the sun itself had descended to the earth. As soon as the meteors fell, they dispersed, leaving behind only craters of destruction. In one of these craters, a man and his swords also turned to nothing, the same bandit who dared to attack Ju-yeon. The brother and sister were shocked to see what had happened. The attack hadn't even touched them. Having released such destructive power, Ju-yeon felt a sense of weakness wash over him. He let himself fall backwards and, lying on the ground, celebrated his victory. He said they had survived. He knew that if it weren't for his teleportation powers, he wouldn't have lived to tell the tale. Before this expedition, he spent a long time considering how to distribute his skills. At the time, he had 4 available slots. Since he had already copied Fireball and Explosion as part of his combat technique, 1 slot was left free. It was then that he came across a video on the internet about arrow combinations with teleportation. Although he wasn't sure he could pull off the same trick, he decided to copy the ability just in case. Its stats immediately appeared. Ju-yeon soon realized that this was, in fact, mass teleportation, so he decided to put this ability in his last available slot. Seeing how well he had prepared, he could not contain his joy and even jumped on the bed like a child. Now, lying on the ground, he simply asked his brother and sister not to ask him any more questions. Haeji, however, wasn't particularly curious. Her intentions were far more shameless. She offered to pick up the items that those idiots dropped. Having collected the loot, the trio climbed the hill. When they were already far away, another group arrived at the site of the battle and were stunned by the consequences. Faced with so many craters, they were in shock and wondered what the hell had happened here. They called it madness. They suggested looking at the size of these holes, and they asked if Muhammad Ali had ever walked through here. Despite saving his life, Ju-yeon was still on the verge of tears. Having demonstrated such a powerful ability, he felt it was only a matter of time before he was discovered. When they returned home, Ju-yeon shared some truth with his siblings. Haeji was the most surprised. When she heard about the skill master, Ju-yeon told them the truth. He had a class that allowed him to copy any skill. Haeji was shocked, and a realization dawned on her. She realized that this was why he could use healing, damage, and buffs simultaneously. Her understanding went further, and she pointed to herself. She guessed that he could even copy her skills. To her dismay, Ju-yeon confirmed that he could. Then Haeji pointed to her brother and asked if Ju-yeon could copy his skills too. He could. As if she'd found a priceless treasure, Haeji approached Ju-yeon with shining eyes. She asked if this even made sense. And how many skills can he copy? The protagonist stopped her, saying that this detail would remain a secret for now. Brother Haeji wasn't too concerned about Ju-yeon's class. He wanted to get to the main point. He asked if he knew anything about the people who attacked them. After thinking for a bit, the protagonist suggested that these could be the same people who were in the raid on Canal. Haeji also told her brother that she had a lead on who they were. With a sharp look, she stated that they must be from the Raiders Guild. To explain further, Haeji asked Ju-yeon if he had heard of a group that collects items from boss monsters. The protagonist had, in fact, encountered such a group before. Haeji explained that some time ago, this group, the Raiders Guild, tried to recruit them, offering in exchange the rights to use items from bosses. The protagonist didn't fully understand how this guild was connected to people who attacked others. Haeji quickly got to the point. She said that among the items recovered from the attackers were several boss-level items. They have an extremely low drop rate, so it would be difficult for more than one group to collect that many. She explained that it was an organization with roots all over the planet. They still didn't know who their leader was, but now that he'd made enemies, he needs to be careful. Hearing the warning, the protagonist became so frightened that his gaze darkened. Later, when they separated, he lay down on the bed, trying to relax. As he reflected on what had happened in the last few days, he realized that he had experienced countless incidents. His identity was nearly discovered several times. Fearing exposure, he knew he had to become stronger before that happened. He needed to acquire high-ranking abilities. Opening his stats window, Ju-yeon saw that he had accumulated 30,000 points. Using some of his resources, he spent 5,000 points and improved his subtrait. His hourly income increased. He hoped the points would accumulate while he rested in bed, but he knew that wouldn't be very effective. As a reward, Joo-yeon decided to spend all his remaining points on an ability that would help resolve the crisis. Since even E-rank traits provided a huge boost in effectiveness, the potential of D-rank traits made him excited. Having opened the sub-dash window, the protagonist wanted to check the best available options. Now he had the skill storage sub-dash. Joo-yeon sighed and held back tears, imagining how he could have maintained his fighting skill if he'd developed this trait earlier. Copying skills from videos wasn't all that effective. After thinking for a while, Joo-yeon decided which skill to keep. He held out his hand and energy flowed through it as he chose to resist change. Since he could use the skill infinitely as long as it remained in the vault, deciding which ones to keep was easy. After resisting the changes, Joo-yeon decided that he should keep the shining power from Hyeji and a powerful combat skill. Since he didn't have them at a high rank yet, Joo-yeon planned to try to get them randomly while he was resting for a few days. Joo-yeon intended to rest, but the next moment he found himself sitting with Hyeji and her brother in front of Muhammad Al. Seeing Muhammad greeting him in person for the first time, Joo-yeon almost cried. Once he decided to take a temporary break, a guest appeared. He then went to greet him, and not just anyone, but him, Muhammad Al. Accompanied by his secretary, Muhammad folded his arms and commented that he had caused quite a stir. He reported that rumors that the mage from the battle in the canal, the psychopath, and he were the same person were suppressed to prevent them from spreading. The protagonist was about to thank Muhammad for his service when Hyeji interrupted him. She thanked him, but asked why he was there. Seeing how the girl took the initiative, Muhammad kindly replied that there was no need to be so careful. He just wanted to hear what his friends thought. Still crossing his arms, Muhammad confirmed what the group had already suspected. Those who had attacked them were part of a global guild called Raider. Hyeji was a little surprised that Muhammad already knew this. Soon, the high-ranking hunter continued, saying that, coincidentally, he was already at war with this guild. Because of this, he was able to gather some information. They are currently meeting secretly at a ski resort in Gonjiam, searching for the lost treasure left behind by the Raider leader. Hearing about something involving a huge amount of money, the group of hunters were stunned. Hyeji spoke again, asking why he was telling them something so important, and whether he shouldn't act on his own. Muhammad ultimately upset her with his response. He apologized for not being able to help directly, as any move he made would attract too much attention. As the conversation continued, the secretary informed him that the time of his next scheduled meeting was approaching. Urged on by her, he sighed, annoyed that such an important moment was ending so quickly. Before leaving, he gave Joo-yeon one last message. He said it was up to them to decide what to do with this information. Whether it's defeating the enemy on his side or simply defending themselves, he just wants to know what their response will be. In the vast ruins with scarlet floors, the army gathered before a dark portal that was slowly opening. A woman appeared from this portal. She carried the monster in her hands, not paying attention to its size. When the monster's entire body left the ethereal realm, those waiting for her saw that it was tens of times larger than the woman who had successfully hunted it. The masked man immediately bowed before her, greeting Ms. Ling Xiaoling. With a pleasant smile, the woman with black hair with gray streaks pulled back into a ponytail made a simple gesture upon seeing the man. Not expecting the attack, his body flew into the wall on the other side of the hall. She took the opportunity to correct those who still approached her casually. She noticed that since the former guild leader left this world, she was now officially the leader of the Raiders Guild, right? With the support of a special field, the Tower of Destruction, the new leader of the Raiders Guild, Ling Xiaoling, made sure everyone started calling her boss. Leaving the monster aside, Xiaoling reported that the monster's locations had been traced all the way to the 20th floor. She ordered the materials from all of them to be analyzed. Changing the subject, she asked how the old man's faction suppression was going. Her subordinate immediately reported that 98% of the old generation's followers had already been eliminated. Xiaoling was extremely pleased with the report and thought further. She decided that the old man's treasure, hidden in Korea, it should still be intact, and she ordered it to be returned as planned. The gloomy Xiaoling had only one thing on her mind: to end the era when anyone could earn money without skill, and to usher in an era of the superpowered. She believed that those who conquered special fields and obtained boss monster items would wield the true power of the world, and in this new realm, she would ascend to the throne. Unaware of Xiaoling's thoughts, Joo-yeon enjoyed the snow with a bright smile. It was his first time at a ski resort. The scenery at the Gonjiam ski resort was breathtaking. The snow never melted, and travel was limited by snowstorms. There were few people. Delighted with the place, Heji quickly came up with a plan. She suggested finishing it up quickly so they could get back and play. In contrast to her enthusiasm, her brother looked gloomy. He wasn't sure if coming here had been a wise decision. Before the trip, Songguk was shocked to hear that his sister wanted to go against the Raiders Guild first. She actually sold the items she took from the bandits who attacked them, and she did all this under her real name. He was horrified to realize how carelessly his sister could make herself a target, but she didn't stop smiling. Even in this situation, because now she and Joo-yeon shared the same fate. He slapped himself in the face, frustrated that he had let his guard down instead of taking care of things himself. Now that they were already at the hunting ground, Heji reassured her brother, asking what there was to worry about. She noted that the three of them were veterans who had already been through hard times. Not only Songguk, but Joo-yeon himself was surprised to hear that she counted him among the veterans, since he had already encountered a boss raid and fought a group hunting players. Heji couldn't call him a newbie anymore. As they were leaving the resort, Heji explained the situation. When they were stopped by someone with a katana, two menacing-looking men were there to chase them away. They stated that this hunting ground was under the control of the Enjoy Guild, so they told them to leave if they didn't want any trouble. Confused, Heji asked if they were association users or something. Before she could get closer to continue her questioning, one of the men drew his katana. Instantly, Heji sensed their intentions. With a mocking look, the man holding the sword threatened, saying to hell with the association, this place belongs to their guild. At that moment, Joo-yeon's heart started beating faster and his expression darkened. He may not be a hero, but the thought of protecting what was dear to him filled his mind. The man blocking their path continued to taunt Heji. He asked if she was so upset. Why didn't she hug him? Songguk gritted his teeth at the provocation. He was about to act when Joo-yeon pulled his hood over his face. A small flame appeared in the protagonist's hand, like the rage burning in his heart. He thought this bastard had dared to point a sword at one of his men. The small flame turned into a massive fireball controlled by Joo-yeon's finger. Seeing this, many nearby guild members were shocked and quickly recognized him. They realized it was the same psycho. Joo-yeon had no reason to stand still when he had the power to crush those who threatened him. He asked the man with the sword with a grim expression. He asked if control shouldn't come with power. He offered to show him what it was like to be controlled. The man tried to retreat after seeing the fireball, claiming that their guild had arrived first. But before he could continue barking, the fireball exploded with flame and fury, launched by Joo-yeon. The man barely dodged it and became enraged. He thought the madman had actually thrown a fireball, the damn bastard. But before he could complain for another second, Joo-yeon looked at him darkly. He warned that if he appeared before him again, he would face consequences. Seeing how Joo-yeon acted, Heji felt that he was a little different from usual. Following behind, she tried to tease him. She exclaimed, "Wow," and said that Joo-yeon's dominance was amazing. Hearing the praise, the protagonist turned around with a shy smile. He asked again, "Really?" Perhaps he was being harsh. Surprised and confused, Heji watched as his personality changed again in a matter of seconds. Even Joo-yeon was a little taken aback. This was his first time intimidating anyone, but he'd done it so well. He began to wonder if this was his true talent. In the hinterland of the snowy fields, a group from the Enjoy Guild fought a tough battle against wolves and werewolves. After the victory, one man laughed in celebration. He noticed that no one else was there to share the spoils. However, in the midst of his celebration, a massive fireball, like a blazing sun, fell from the sky. Jumping back, he narrowly avoided the attack, completely confused. He screamed, asking who the hell started it. In response to his question, a man in a white hood appeared. He asked him what he thought. He replied that he was simply someone who had come here to hunt. The man became angry and shouted at the hooded figure. He asked if he had seen the warning outside. He claimed that the field was under their guild's control. But in response, only a gloomy smile appeared on the man's lips. Guild leader. Enjoy scratched his head and ordered the strangers to retreat. He said not to waste time. He noticed there were several level 40 guys there. The man walked towards the Enjoy Guild group and removed his hood, revealing gray hair and the face of a middle-aged man. With a grim look, he challenged them to see who would end up leaving. Suddenly, a group of people emerged from the snow, attacking with sharp blades. The Enjoy Guild tried to flee, but the attackers didn't let them get far. The gray-haired man chuckled as his team wiped out the group. He said there were so many useless fools. The man next to him in the green hood apologized. He apologized for not having realized this sooner. and he said that apparently a guild called Enjoy had begun to control this field. Unfazed by the problem, the man gave the order to the scout. He instructed him to split the team into 2 groups to hunt down anyone who stood in their way. That way, they wouldn't be disturbed. Looking ahead, he stared at the tall mountain rising in the distance, to the deepest and highest part of the hunting grounds. This was their destination, where they were supposed to find the imitation bracelet. Unaware of what happened inside the hunting grounds, Ju-yeon and Hyeji laughed happily while enjoying the snow. The girl's brother, however, had a grim expression. He said they'd managed to get in, but they needed to start thinking about the next step. He reminded them that the Raiders Guild wasn't as small as theirs, and that a preemptive strike was necessary. He asked how, first of all, they were going to distinguish them from the Enjoy Guild. His question made the group pause, searching for a solution. The protagonist suggested one possibility. The Raiders Guild was known for focusing on treasure, meaning they weren't interested in the experience gained from monsters. This realization made Ju-yeon smile mischievously as he came up with a cunning plan. The Raiders Guild, having taken control of the snowfield, remained as inconspicuous as possible, even hiding their faces with masks. As the group walked towards the mountains, they heard a noise. Suddenly, a group of wolves and werewolves appeared. The number of monsters, increasing with each passing second, quickly formed a horde. At the top of the snow-covered hill, Ju-yeon and the others admired the magnificent view. He was simply returning the favor, using the same kind of pheromones the raiders had used against them last time. Sunguk was a little confused by the method, as they weren't sure if the people down there really belonged to the raiders. However, the protagonist disagreed and explained why. He said that if they see a horde of monsters and don't run, it can only mean 2 things. Either the group is willing to farm experience points, or they have things important enough to take the risk. Hyeji analyzed the abilities of the group below, confirming that they all seemed to be above the level recommended for this hunting ground. Such people were there despite the impossibility of gaining any experience. This simple observation led them to the conclusion that the group was there for something important, and they weren't monsters. After the raider group defeated all the monsters, the protagonist decided that they should follow them. But before he took the first step, he wanted to leave them a small gift and threw another pheromone grenade. Following Ju-yeon and observing his actions and emotions, Hyeji wondered if he had always been like this. To her surprise, he seemed like a completely different person. The man in the green cloak climbed the hill with the woman, following the location marked on the map. A moment later, the 2 led the rest of the group to a cave hidden in the snow. Watching from afar, Ju-yeon considered himself lucky to have seen them reach their final destination. Confused, Hyeji asked what they would do next. However, Ju-yeon had only planned up to this point. Faced with the situation, Ju-yeon felt uneasy, not because of her, but because of himself. Even though he was about to ambush those who had attacked him earlier, he felt completely calm. Lost in thought for so long, Ju-yeon flinched when Hyeji called out to him. He apologized, saying he was just thinking, and focused again. Knowing there was no time to waste, he pulled out his crossbow, the weapon they had obtained in the previous battle against the raiders. At the cave entrance, 2 people were talking, surprised by the monster's appearance. Although they feared a fight, they were nonetheless relieved that they had volunteered to go to a place where they could hide. As they continued talking, Ju-yeon took careful aim. The sound of a crossbow shot alerted one of the raiders, the one Ju-yeon was aiming at. The first arrow hit the target, but the second missed, as the warrior was now on guard. As his comrade fell, the remaining raider glanced around nervously. He asked who was there, and it was at that moment that he began to tremble. He couldn't understand what was happening. He remembered dodging the second shot. However, the bow of weakness had several characteristics. If the target's health, agility, or strength were below 30, it would inflict a stun, slow, and pain, respectively. Seeing that only the slow debuff had been applied, the protagonist concluded that at least the man's health and strength were above 30. What a shame. He wanted the guy to experience all the debuffs. The Kim siblings left Ju-yeon to deal with the situation while watching from behind. The bandit despaired as Ju-yeon approached, speaking in an ominous voice. He said it looked like he'd have to manually reduce his health to 0. A moment later, a scream echoed outside the cave. Inside, the trio, led by the hooded man, found a chest, and in it a bracelet. The tank of this group picked up the communicator, trying to contact the reconnaissance group, but only static was heard in response. The man immediately reported to his leader that they had lost contact with those at the entrance to the cave. Realizing that the rear group was under attack, the group cast spells. Preparing for battle, they declared that they must protect the treasure at any cost. With the tank in front, the trio quickly reached the entrance to the cave, where they found both comrades lying on the ground. Before they could check on the pair, Heji appeared with her staff, causing a firestorm. Several attacks, like flaming hail, crashed against the tank's shield, which had a barrier that nullified magic. Heji raised an eyebrow, surprised by what she saw. At that moment, lightning cut through the snowy field, striking her brother with lightning force. Why is it made of iron? It worked like a lightning rod. The man in the green hood reacted quickly, giving orders to his partner. He said the tank had been neutralized, and ordered the mages to be destroyed before the paralysis wore off. The woman quickly emerged from behind her tank. This action disappointed Ju-yeon. He wondered if they really thought that because the tank couldn't move, they were helpless. Without wasting a second, Ju-yeon activated his shining power. Then, limit breaker energy surged through his body like crackling lightning. Several buffs were instantly applied to Ju-yeon. His magic was boosted, along with his health, attack, critical damage, and defense penetration. As his attack rank increased by 1 level, he created numerous fireballs with a wide smile on his face. Seeing the young man summoning fireballs, the man in the green cloak laughed at him. He asked if he still used fireballs at their level. However, contrary to his words, Ju-yeon's fireballs scorched the air and exploded on the enemy, throwing him back where he came from. Amidst the explosions, both he and the tank were defeated. Only the man in the green hood remained, his face and clothes covered in ash. His jaw dropped in disbelief, as fireballs couldn't bypass that kind of damage reduction. Ju-yeon held out his hand and proudly declared that he would put their treasures to good use. As soon as his hand tightened, a series of explosions thundered, destroying everything before him. Elsewhere, the silver-haired man was still dealing with a horde of monsters. He had previously informed his team that once the situation was resolved, they would regroup with another squad on the mountain. It was then that a massive explosion of such force rose into the sky that it caught his attention. Seeing the explosion, he screamed in despair, ordering them to move quickly to the mountain, immediately. Once they defeated the 3 remaining members of the raiding party, Ju-yeon and the others began collecting the loot. With an armful of items in his hands, Ju-yeon's eyes sparkled like a kid in a toy store. He wondered how they could all carry so many items from boss monsters. Although all the items were incredible, Heji expressed concern. She said she was worried about the growing number of items that needed to be disposed of. She added that she would like to avoid revealing her location to these guys. While thinking about how to get rid of the items, Heji saw her brother pick up a shield that another tank had dropped. Then he looked at her with the eyes of a pleading puppy. Looking at him suspiciously, she met her brother's gaze and finally nodded at his silent request. She said, "He doesn't have to sell it, he can use it, bro." While Ju-yeon was putting away various items, Hyeji walked up to him and handed him something. In the girl's hand was a bracelet adorned with a gold-painted snake. It was a mimicry bracelet. It didn't count toward the accessory limit and mimicked the effect of another accessory. Surprised that Heji was giving him the item, the protagonist asked if he could really keep it. With a wink, Heji explained why she didn't mind. She said they didn't have many items worth imitating anyway. And she added that it would be better to give something like this to someone who already has S-rank accessories, since he is the ace of their team. Having received both the item and the compliment, Ju-yeon was stunned. He bowed again and again, thanking the girl, who maintained a proud smile on her face. While Heji was receiving praise, her brother asked if they could leave already, as the second team could arrive at any moment. The brother and sister started to walk away, but before leaving, Ju-yeon looked back. He noticed something attached to one of the bodies, a small body camera. For safety's sake, he decided to destroy it. In a dark room, a vase of flowers flew over the shoulder of a masked man, smashing against the wall. Lin Xiaoling smiled before him, but her anger was unmistakable. She asked what he had said, adding that she thought she had misheard. The man quickly fell to his knees, begging for forgiveness. Even gritting his teeth in fear, he was forced to repeat it. He said that the mimicry bracelet was taken by someone else. Xiaoling's furious aura radiated as she looked at him with a gloomy expression. She stated that they sent units capable of clearing the entire field with the boss, and he lost the item. The man tried to explain. The group guarding the monsters survived, but the advance team sent to retrieve the bracelet was wiped out by the enemy. He reported that when reviewing body camera footage from the team fighting the monsters, they found evidence of the use of pheromone bombs. Curious, Xiaoling asked about the kill team's body cameras. However, she was told that they had all been destroyed. She could understand that. This meant the remaining team had failed to retrieve the boss monster's item. She was inwardly impressed by the group that had confronted them. They used skills and items to separate them, and even removed the body cameras from her subordinates to prevent analysis of the battle. Since the man mentioned in the explosion, Xiaoling concluded that the culprit was the notorious psychopath. She kicked him to the ground and gave him a final warning. She told him not to make that mistake again, and she ordered that this bastard be analyzed properly. Otherwise, next time, instead of a bracelet, he would bring his head. Meanwhile, Ju-yeon and the others returned to the apartment. During the meeting, Hyeji rested her chin on her hand, sharing her thoughts. She said she wanted to hold on to the boss monster items for now instead of selling them. The protagonist was surprised by her decision, as they could have upgraded several pieces of equipment with the money they would have earned. However, Hyeji tried to convince him, saying that they needed to avoid being tracked. She explained that she had revealed her identity last time to protect Ju-yeon, but that continuing like that would be problematic. While her brother grumbled about her decisions, Hyeji continued to explain to Ju-yeon, assuring him that this didn't mean they would stop hunting. While writing something down, she asked Ju-yeon to confirm that he was indeed at level 20. She explained that suitable hunting grounds are divided into 10-level ranges, so she asked what the level limit was for F-rank fields where he could still receive rewards. Raising his hand like a diligent student, Ju-yeon replied that it would be level 20. Moving on to the next question, she wanted to know how many field bosses he'd already defeated. Using his fingers, Ju-yeon began counting carefully. He fought D-rank bosses such as the Spider Queen and the Lizard King, Mountain Python, which was E-rank, and some F-ranks like Black Bear, Flattened Crab, One-Eyed Crow, Burrowing Mole, and Cannell, although that case didn't count since it was a special field boss. In the end, Ju-yeon realized that he had only defeated a few F-rank monsters. After finishing the notes, Hyeji reminded him that once he exceeded the recommended level, he would no longer be able to collect boss souls, so they needed to hurry. After displaying several locations on a holographic map, Hyeji laid out a plan to attack boss monsters in less popular fields to avoid attracting attention. The development of a clear plan delighted her, and since they were following it, she suggested they also gather all the E-rank monsters. As planned, the group headed to the first field, where they encountered their first boss. The sand dune monster in the great field of Sanuri seemed to crumble and reform with every blow it received. Surrounded by small fireballs, the protagonist was faced with a boss fight. Soon after, the sand giant fragment was absorbed, giving Ju-yeon another health point. Feeling how much he'd grown, the main character raised his arms in triumph. Impressed by how quickly he defeated the monster, Hyeji asked how many minutes had passed. Taking out his phone, the protagonist smiled, seeing that he had defeated the boss in only 5 minutes and 45 seconds. Excited, Hyeji jumped up and hugged Ju-yeon around the neck. She congratulated him on achieving his goal and suggested throwing a party to celebrate collecting all the E-rank fragments. Blushing with embarrassment, the protagonist smiled shyly and said there was no need for a party. He'd made quite a bit of progress thanks to the mimicry bracelet. He thought Hyeji thought he'd copied the elemental ring with the bracelet, but in fact, he'd copied the cursed necklace. With tears in his eyes, he kissed the bracelet, blessing the 15-point increase to all of his stats. Feeling on top of this world, Ju-yeon stated that if he continued to improve like this, then he can become stronger than Muhammad Allah himself. While the brother and sister watched him, the protagonist hummed something under his breath, heading towards the new monsters in the distance. While the protagonist was having fun, Ego, the training assistant, was watching him. She reached out her hand, touching the surface of the water through which she watched him. The protagonist was waiting for a mission that would earn him a lot of points, and as expected, the mission appeared. It required him to attempt to conquer a special E-rank field, defeat the invaders who had discovered the new camp, and eliminate the plague plaguing these lands. The plague's very existence devoured and corrupted everything around it. Seeing Ju-yeon staring into space, Hyeji wondered if he had discovered a new ability or something. Keeping his secret, the protagonist quickly replied that it was something similar. He simply stated that he had been given a mission that would make him stronger if he completed it. Hyeji was surprised and a little jealous. Looking at the number of points he would receive, Ju-yeon's smile spread from ear to ear. As befits the main quest, in order to gather more information, he picked up his phone and began to study the specific field mentioned in the mission. He found out that the place was a 3-hour plane ride away. When he looked at the region's climate, the protagonist was stunned. His jaw literally dropped. At that very moment, the temperature there was a staggering -40 degrees Celsius. Hearing that they would have to clear a special field for Ju-yeon's mission, the mage Hyeji was speechless. She tried to remind him that he could barely handle regular boss fields. The protagonist understood her concerns, but he couldn't do anything if the mission was completely absurd. She still tried to remind him that although he had become stronger, he had no experience leading a raid. There was another problem. If a special field was located in another country, gaining access would be difficult without recognized status. Heji knew that only select people could enter such fields. Large groups such as guilds were prohibited from entering. Ju-yeon sensed a strange atmosphere between the brother and sister, who seemed eager to close the topic. Instead of insisting, Hyeji chose to move on to the second stage of Ju-yeon's strengthening plan. As if she knew him inside and out, she confidently stated that instead of combining multiple skills, he usually applied a buff to increase his attack power, and then defeated his enemies with a fireball. The protagonist realized she was right and was immediately asked why he didn't increase the number of high-ranking skills he could copy. Sighing, the protagonist said that there was little he could do, as high-ranking users kept their best skills secret. Heji acknowledged that this made sense. She noted that unless it's someone attention-seeking like Muhammad Allah, most people prefer to keep their identities hidden. Heji thought about something and asked the protagonist if he'd never heard of buff vendors. She explained that they did something similar to how he sold healing. The only problem Heji saw with this plan was that she never saw for someone to sell buffs of rank S or higher. The protagonist began to ponder the topic, and soon remembered the man who gave him the phone number. Seeing Ju-yeon deep in thought, the brother and sister watched him closely. The protagonist pulled out his phone and showed it to both of them. He said he knew someone who could help. In the heavenly kingdom, Ego gazed into space with a smile. She reported to her master that the hero had accepted his second mission. A transcendental voice responded, filled with magic. It said his memories should begin to return soon, and that this would bring Earth one step closer to salvation. The transcendent being noticed Ego's vacant gaze and asked what was troubling her. Ego had a desire to see once again the hero who saved the world from which she came. The transcendental voice tried to explain that she was already seeing this person at this moment, but Ego did not fully agree. She countered that a person is made up of their memories, and the hero has nothing from his past. So she asked how he could be the same person she knew. The transcendental being that sent Ju-yeon back to his world was silent for a moment before replying that its true self was focused on maintaining the balance between dimensions. He explained that although this version spoke to her, it was merely a projection, and he questioned whether it was really him or not. Ego responded immediately. For her, he remained the same. Her answer served as an argument for the creature. It then concluded that the man was still its hero. Seemingly dejected, Ego wondered if the hero would make the same choice as before. But the transcendent being knew that was impossible to predict. Everything must proceed according to his will and choice. He said that this was the vow he made to the world he created. And he added that if he is the hero she misses, then she should go to him. He noticed that whether she wants to help him or not is her choice, so she must decide for herself. Hearing the creature's words, Ego maintained a melancholic look until she made her decision. Her clothes began to transform. Shoes and long socks covered her feet, and soon she transformed into a cheerful Hyeju who answered the call. She greeted Ju-yeon, noticing how much time had passed. The scene changed. After their journey, Ju-yeon and his group waited patiently for the guests to arrive. Hyeji, arms crossed, looked a little irritated. She was outraged that they had traveled all the way to Seoul Grand Park without even asking for compensation for the trip. She noted that the fee would be standard and said she found that suspicious. Confident and proud, the protagonist rubbed his nose. He replied that it simply showed how much people loved him. Not only Heji, but also her brother began to find the whole situation suspicious. Hyeju suddenly appeared, cheerfully hugging Ju-yeon's hand. She called him Oppa and said that so much time had passed since he last greeted her. Hyeji frowned as she saw how the girl who appeared out of nowhere was treating Ju-yeon. The protagonist blushed deeply, embarrassed by the fact that a pretty girl was hugging him, and scratched the back of his head. He justified it by saying that he had become very busy. Trying to separate them, Hyeji introduced herself. She said hello and said she'd heard a lot about her from Ju-yeon. Was she an SS-Rank buffer? Hyeju smiled cheerfully, hiding her tigerish temperament. She realized that she was Ju-yeon's Oppa's friend. Like an angry lioness, Heji hid her jealousy and retorted that perhaps she was someone a little closer to him. In an attempt to smooth over Heji's rudeness, the protagonist tried to introduce her to Hyeja as the manager, but upon hearing this, Heji became so angry that she slapped him hard on the back. Sanguk caught the protagonist before he could fall and joined the conversation. He reminded them that, as they had discussed, they needed a buff like an enchantment. Turning to him, Hyeju asked what kind of buff he wanted and how much he could pay. While helping Ju-yeon up, Sang-guk asked Hyeju to deal directly with him as a sponsor. Seeing that Ju-yeon would leave the conversation to Hyeju, Hyeji realized that she should have thought about her actions more carefully. The protagonist paused for a moment and began to stutter. He said it should be SSS-Rank, with a substantial and instantaneous boost, where everything works at once. He added that it must be something amazing. The atmosphere became a little awkward due to Ju-yeon's confusing explanations. However, Hyeju acted as if she understood everything completely. Soon, a golden power appeared around her body, and large white wings spread out behind her. With a blessed golden glow, the ability Heavenly Harmony was created. A blessing sung by angels to sustain the heavens, it bestowed a powerful divine effect. The protagonist felt the enchanted bonus strengthen his body. Having bestowed such a powerful skill upon her beloved hero, Hyeju smiled contentedly. A long time ago, when she first gave this buff to Ju-yeon, Ego was worried because there were many better defensive buffs. She wanted to know if this was really the one he wanted, but her hero gave her the best possible answer. He said the best defense is a relentless offense. In this life, Ju-yeon returned the same smile he had that day. He thanked her and said the buff was perfect. At the time, Ju-yeon didn't know that rumors were circulating about him online. In one video, someone claimed they would never support him again. There was a commotion brewing, reminding people of what had happened to the Anjoy Guild, along with gossip about events in the popular fields. In one video, someone complained about him knocking down and taming boars. They suggested watching footage of him recently destroying a guild in Panmasan. The video's circulation only fueled the criticism. The scene changed. The Plague Land was a special E-rank field. The average temperature there hovered around -30 degrees Celsius. The harsh climate made long-term stays impossible, and the vast expanses made finding the field boss even more difficult, forcing countless users to sacrifice themselves. Over time, the country developed special measures. The protagonist, sitting on a rock in a warm climate, was confused to find that he would have to wait for the field boss to appear. Hyeji approached and explained the reason. She said that in special fields, after a certain amount of time, even ordinary monsters try to escape their boundaries. And she asked if he really thought that the field boss would just sit and wait for people. Sang-guk continued his explanation, noting that if attempts to conquer the field continued to fail, it would ultimately be less than ideal. Placing his new massive shield on the ground, he frowned. In any case, he was against entering the special field, especially without proper preparation. And he reminded us that no matter how important the mission, we mustn't forget that we only have one life. Frustrated, the protagonist asked when he would carry out the mission. It seemed like all he could do was copy and distribute skills. Hyeji, supporting Ju-yeon, objected to her brother. She said that if you only care about security, you'll never become a full-fledged user. Noticing Ju-yeon's strange movements, she asked what he was doing. The protagonist admitted that he was trying out the skill gacha, as his copy skills cooldown was available. But good rank-up skills don't drop. While watching a video on his phone, the protagonist copied the combat skill again. Bloody battle. Having exhausted all attempts at copying, the protagonist felt disappointed. However, when he least expected it, the combat skill that was SS-Rank evolved. Sang-guk talked to Hyeji, explaining that if they were going to enter such a dangerous place, the main damage dealer needed to be as strong as possible. At that moment, the protagonist jumped for joy, exclaiming that he had finally obtained an X-rank skill. He added that he would never have to see Haesung's face again. The siblings felt like they had seen something like this before, but they quickly returned to the main topic. As foreigners, they were still not allowed to enter fields in other countries. That's when Hyeji received a call. She responded with a smile on her face, seeing the contact, which attracted the attention of the two boys. Their curiosity grew even more when she started acting affectionate. She asked again in surprise, "Really?" confirmed her readiness and promised to be sure to convey this to Hyeon. As soon as she hung up, a dark aura surrounded Hyeji as she reported that she had received an urgent call from Haesung from the Korean Guild. Her expression quickly turned to a proud smile as she shared the news. She announced that the special plague land field was open to foreigners. "We are recruiting for a raid group. We need mages." Seeing that he was likely to be left out in the cold, Sang-guk began to argue with her. Allowing the two of them to argue, the protagonist became confused about several things. Hyeji mentioned mages, but Chu Hye-yeon was specifically summoned as a priest. The protagonist focused on preparations. The scene changes. Numerous users began to gather in the large theater, each sitting in their assigned place. Sitting next to his brother and sister, Yoo Ju-yeon admitted how impressed he was that they rented an entire building. Haeji couldn't help but smile at this comment. She noted that this time, everyone was an elite participant, requiring no verification. There was no point in meeting in the field. Recalling what had happened earlier, the protagonist teased her, noting that she had done nothing last time. He then asked why she had been called. Just when the brother and sister were about to start a fight, a man walked onto the theater stage. He asked if they really thought S-Rank users were common. He greeted and introduced himself as Haesun, the raid leader of the expedition to the Land of Plague. The users prepared for the briefing. Haesung explained that the raid would last 10 days, starting today. They would depart as soon as survival supplies arrived. He described everyone present as high-level participants, carefully selected from the Celestial Island. He asked them to trust his judgment and demonstrate their best skills, and he promised that he would conquer the Land of Plagues with them. Listening to Haesung's speech, the protagonist began clapping enthusiastically. This caught the man's attention, who frowned and looked at him. Before sharing details about the field, he suggested a short get-to-know-you session. The protagonist was surprised by this beginning, but continued to watch. Haesung started by introducing himself as a level 39 melee fighter with the unique trait, Critical Strike. The next man in the room to raise his hand was Miryeon-soo Kim, an A-rank buffer. The protagonist was shocked by the introductions and wondered if this was a high school reunion. What bothered Ju-yeon the most was the feeling that Haesung was looking straight at him. The muscular man stood up with a friendly smile. He admitted that he admired Haesung's leadership, but the protagonist didn't understand why Haesung was ignoring him. Soon Sang-guk also introduced himself. After the tank's introduction, it was his sister Haeji's turn, who introduced herself as a fire mage and revealed her unique ability, the Flame of the Apocalypse. During the introduction, while Haesung's gaze slid over everyone present, the protagonist felt that this presentation was aimed specifically at him. The protagonist made a decision and stood up, creating a large fireball. He said hello, introduced himself as Yoo Ju-yeon, and mentioned that some might know him as a psychopathic SS-Rank mage. Seeing such a spectacular appearance, Haesung smiled through gritted teeth. After the introductions, the lights came up and some people began to leave the theater. Whistling, Hyeji stood up and asked Ju-yeon if he wanted anything to eat. The protagonist was surprised, as she had just finished eating. As the trio were about to leave the theater, Haesung approached them. In fact, Ju-yeon was expecting him to come. Approaching the protagonist, Haesung got straight to the point. He asked directly if Ju-yeon was the man who had taken the item from the field boss and was with the masked group on Sky Island. The protagonist didn't expect such directness, and Hyeji was surprised, not knowing how to intervene to help Ju-yeon. The protagonist crossed his arms, defending himself with compelling arguments. He claimed to be the mage who had contributed most to the raid that day. But he added that he wasn't with those guys and didn't take anything. He explained that he had simply found suspicious individuals looking for Canal. He said that since he couldn't stop them, he only came up to get a share, but they mistook him and thought he was part of their group. The protagonist put Haesung in an awkward position by stating that usually the one who contributed the most deserves the best prize. Ju-yeon crossed his arms and issued an ultimatum. He said that if this bothered him, he wouldn't join the raid. Ju-yeon knew that if they were going to work together, everything had to be crystal clear. And if all else failed, he was prepared to find another way to accomplish his mission. Haesung revealed the reason for his suspicions. He reported that 2 members of their guild had died in the battle against Canal, and he said that he needed to confirm whether Ju-yeon was with them or not. He stated that in that case, he had no objections to his participation. Despite Haesung's words, the protagonist knew he didn't trust Ju-yeon completely. They both felt the same way. After Haesung left, the protagonist sighed and Hyeji approached him. She admired how cool it was. Sang-guk sighed, seeing that everything had gone more smoothly than he expected. Hyeji turned to her brother, who didn't want her to get involved with Haesung. She asked if he was disappointed that Haesung didn't object, even though his brother didn't want them involved. In response, the brother shocked even the protagonist with his comment. He admitted that he honestly thought Haesung would attack Ju-yeon, but things ended better than he expected. Having settled everything in the theater, the protagonist headed towards the stairs, leading the group to the exit. Seeing his gaze, Haeji asked if something was wrong. With a dejected look, the protagonist revealed what was bothering him. He said he was just wondering whether he should come out publicly or not. At first, he thought that everyone would be shocked by his personality, but surprisingly, everyone reacted calmly. However, someone was typing quickly on their phone, compiling a report. The author wrote to friends that the main character's aura was frightening. People who saw the post did not believe it was true, but soon others present agreed with the author. While Yoo-Yeon thought he was acting like an attention seeker, people around him were sending angry messages, burning with fear. Something else was burning: Xiaoling's fireplace. Sitting in a chair, she received the agents who brought her reports. Throwing the papers with information about Yoo-Yeon and his companions on the table, she showed curiosity. Smiling sarcastically, she commented that they were now acting so openly. She added that this was good for them. She announced that the raiders would also join this expedition. Looking at her kneeling subordinates, she gave the order. She commanded them to transform him into a ghost of this snowy field, and ordered an investigation into any changes in other raid teams. Focusing on the blonde, she issued an ultimatum to the expedition team declaring that they must remove any obstacles, no matter how many there were. After countless hours on the plane and many more on the bus, Yoo-Yeon arrived in a city painted white by snow. His first impression of the street was simply that it was damn cold. He couldn't resist asking if a couple of fireballs would warm them up. The idea of using offensive magic in the middle of the city made Haeji burst out laughing. She asked if he was joking. He wasn't. Seeing the arrivals, the elder approached them. He explained that this place was originally not cold, but now the area is under the influence of a special field. Moreover, he added that as this climate contamination gradually spreads, more and more ghost towns are appearing. The man bowed unexpectedly to Ju-Young's group. He called them his only hope and asked them to put an end to this plague. Ju-Young didn't know how to respond to the sudden summons, but the girl immediately answered for him. She told him not to worry, saying that they had come here at a divine call for their salvation, and she asked them to believe in them. The hooded blonde tried to remain inconspicuous. However, surrounded by believers and with the blessed aura, this seemed impossible. The cult of Jin Li. It was a guild formed by users with sacred attributes. Initially, it was a small sect that gathered followers with cheap and low-quality skills. But it gained momentum thanks to one particular user. That user was none other than as a miracle priestess, presumably at least S-rank. She appeared suddenly. It was the young woman in front of Yoo-Yeon, Im-Suha. Recognizing the girl, Haeji was impressed. Next to her, Ju-Yeon was trying to remember who the blonde was, until a revelation dawned on him. He remembered that she was from that very same cult of sectarians. Hearing her guild being talked about, Im-Suha smiled, even though she was annoyed. Haeji then clamped her hand over Ju-Yeon's mouth, silencing him. At that moment, a gruff-looking man introduced himself from behind Im-Suhi. He laughingly called Ju-Yeon a lost lamb who had yet to experience a miracle, and he added that even he was loved. The Jin Li guild group began discussing certain things. Suddenly, with Im-Suhi in attendance, the same man said goodbye as the girl went forward first. He said they needed to rest until the field was cleared, so they would go ahead. As the atmosphere became increasingly strange, Ju-Yeon and his friends were left behind. Haeji immediately began scolding him. She told him to watch his language. While Haeji was beating Ju-Yeon, a young man approached them to defend him. He noticed that he wasn't entirely wrong. He explained that Jin Li's cult was gathering followers and deceiving them. He said it was a well-known story, although why Im-Suha was in such a place still remained a mystery. Seeing him, Haesung quickly stepped forward in front of the group and asked who he was. The young man extended his hand, introducing himself. He said they hadn't met yet. He then identified himself as the leader of a raiding party from the Raiders Guild, who had joined with a small group. Haesung ignored the handshake but introduced himself with a frown. Surrounded by his subordinates, the raider leader smiled. He said he'd heard about the incident that occurred during the recent battle against Canel. He stated that they wanted to avoid unnecessary clashes before the boss fight, adding that it would be better if each of them followed their own strategies. Then he glanced at Ju-Yeon as if issuing a warning. As long as they don't hurt each other. After the veiled threat, the raider leader bowed his head in greeting and left another way with his subordinates. As soon as they left, the protagonist snorted. He had already assumed that the raiders would join the expedition, but seeing them in person was even more unpleasant. Haeji knew there was nothing they could do. She noted that it was a public place, so they just had to be careful. And she said they couldn't split up. Haesung had an obvious strategy. Since the hunting ground was the target of 3 groups, they would have to find the boss first and defeat him quickly. To do this, they had to start unpacking their luggage and preparing for a short meeting. On the X day of the expedition, the group led by Hee-sun stood in front of the portal. They made a final check of their equipment just in case, and under his leadership, they began to enter inside. As soon as they entered, they found themselves in a place even more terrible than what they had left behind. The plague land mixed heavy snowfall with a sky that changed color from blood red to blue-black. Despite poor visibility, someone in the group noticed movement ahead. She asked what it was and whether other users had arrived ahead of them. The man next to her knew this was impossible. He explained that if a group didn't enter together, they would be scattered to random locations. While they were discussing what might lie ahead, they were horrified to discover that they were confronted by numerous undead knights. The ranged fighters acted quickly, showering the monsters with arrows. Many skeletons fell, but the warriors on horseback did not retreat. Sang-guk screamed, rushing forward with his shield. He noticed that these bastards had paper-thin armor, but all their stats were focused on attack. Bravely raising his shield, Sang-guk withstood the heavy blow of the knight's sword. Chaos ensued as the skeletons didn't just die, but someone soon found a solution. Ahead, he declared this their weak point. The battle lasted for hours until all the monsters were defeated. At the end of the day, the group gathered in the cave, lit a fire, and finally rested. They had taken a huge risk, fighting the hardest battle of their lives. Heji was completely exhausted, but she felt relieved that she had prepared several mana potions. But something caught her eye. Lee Hae-sung, who, thanks to his skills, could deal with many enemies single-handedly. While she was looking around, Hae-sung stood up and ordered everyone to take roll call. Looking at Joo-yeon, Hyeji noticed that he had a beaming smile. The protagonist was immensely happy to reap the sweet fruits of battle. Joo-yeon had experience with an X-rank skill before, but he hadn't been able to fully enjoy it back then because of those damn raider bastards. With passive skills, he should have surpassed 150 magic power, gaining additional attack ranks. Joo-yeon was glad he hadn't stopped there. He thought he'd forgotten something. He remembered he'd never thought about it before, but the Shining Power had an incredible option. I noticed that when the magic power reaches 150 points, only A rank or higher enhancements are applied. Seeing how excited Joo-yeon was, Hyeji's brother Sang-guk advised him not to become so overconfident that he got into trouble like before. Smiling, the protagonist reassured him, telling him not to worry. He added that, just in case, he'd also copied teleportation magic. As the trio conversed, Hae-sung gave them a stern look. He asked for everyone's attention. The expedition leader continued his explanation after he had the group's attention. He stated that, as they had seen, there were extremely dangerous areas in this field. And since monsters move in groups, even the outcome of a single battle consumes a lot of weapons and items. While Hae-sung was explaining the goal, find and defeat the boss monster, Joo-yeon yawned. That's when the leader said something interesting. He announced that in connection with this, they would deploy a reconnaissance team to locate the boss, and he asked if there were any volunteers. Joo-yeon perked up at the offer. Beside him, Hyeji didn't even notice that she hadn't lost any interest either. Knowing Joo-yeon and his sister, Sang-guk, had already imagined that they would both volunteer.